Hello and welcome to this, our 57th live stream. Tonight's live stream is entitled, This Business is Our 57. Now, that's a very interesting idiom, given what we're seeing right now happening in US news. Okay? Now, the quote, "This business is our 57," actually comes from a Rudyard Kipling short story called "The Man Who Would Have Been King." And that story is about a European that goes to a foreign land and basically hoodwinks the local population into thinking he's a god. And he marries one of the local women who doesn't want to get married to him. And she bites him and he bleeds. And everyone sees automatically he's not a god. And this results in a riot. The idiom 57 is a reference to 1857, or which was the date of the riots that occurred on the Indian subcontinent. Okay, so it's a very, very interesting idiom, and we do encounter these idioms now and again. And it just so happened that in looking up 57 for this live stream, that to see that idiom being used here in terms of a riot. So, This is an exceptionally interesting idiom, especially given now the timing of this live stream with what's happening right now in the U.S. with the Roe v. Wade ruling coming down from the Supreme Court, which I think is very favorable. I mean, I'm totally in agreement with the Supreme Court on this particular ruling. It's about states' rights, and I think that's when states' rights get abrogated, you get an imbalance in, say, the constitutional powers. Okay, so they are expecting. They have various cities around the U.S. have prepared for riots tonight, so it might be their 57 too. So it's just an incredible irony that this live stream has that particular idiom in respect to what's happening right now in current events. So I don't think that was prophetic, but wow, it's one heck of a coincidence that this business is our 57. So, so that explains the title of tonight's live stream. So we're going to go right into the questions. We've got a lot of questions tonight, and a lot of super chats, and wow, some really great questions tonight. I mean, there's some absolutely fabulous questions tonight. So we're just going to get right into it. If you're not going to give a super chat, we do try to answer all the super chats. If you, but we do answer non-super chats also. So if you're doing a non-super chat question, please put a Q and a colon in front of the question so I know it's being directed to me. Only mention the question once. Okay? Only once. We take some non-super chats at the beginning of the live stream, and we take some at the end after all the super chats have come in too. So if we didn't get your question at the beginning, and we don't guarantee that non-super chat questions always be answered, we do try to make a good faith effort, though, to at least answer some that are interesting, because there are some interesting non-super chat questions, too. So, only post it once. If it's from a Bible verse or a foreign language, please specify either what you think it means in the language or what book of the Bible, chapter, and verse it comes from, to give me a little context so I can try to figure out what's being asked. Okay? So with that said, let's get right into it, as we got some awesome questions tonight. Okay. We're going to start with 4 non-super chats. The first question is from number one Morbius fan. 2 Kings 19:35 says, "The angel of Yahweh destroyed the Assyrian army, as God said he will defend Jerusalem. Yet Hezekiah becomes a vassal of Assyria, paying tribute. Is this revision on the Bible?" Okay. Now, the whole vassalage of Hezekiah is uncertain. Now, we know his predecessor. Let's see, who was his predecessor? I think it's Ahaz. Yeah, Ahaz. Ahaz was a vassal of Tiglath-Pileser III. But we don't know if Hezekiah himself was. In fact, what it seems to be is that the reason Sennacherib tries to invade the kingdom of Judah is because they weren't paying the vassalage that his father, Ahaz, was paying. Now, this is one of the most interesting accounts we have from the Bible, because we actually have it from more than one perspective. We actually have Sennacherib's historical prisms too, and that gives us a very different outlook. Now, interestingly enough, the Sennacherib prisms don't actually call Hezekiah a vassal. Okay, they mention the siege. They mention that Hezekiah was trapped like a bird in a cage, and that's what the Assyrians say. The Assyrians say Hezekiah was trapped like a bird in the cage, and then the President more or less drops the matter. So you get this very, very odd. There's no sort of resolution in his historical prisms. About what was the actual fate of Hezekiah here. So there is some suggestion, there's some illusion in the Assyrian documents that Hezekiah might have been a kind of vassal, but it's not definitive. It's not overt. It's not like Jehu. Jehu is definitely a vassal, under Shalmaneser III. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they show a picture of him. There's a text there saying that Jehu is, son of Omri, is a vassal of Shalmaneser III. There's no question about Jehu. There's no question about Ahaz. There's some question here about Hezekiah from both sides of this conflict. Okay, so it's not clear cut at all in the case of Hezekiah. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. A very interesting question. It's a very interesting historical question, and it's probably one of the best documented events of the Old Testament. But even so, there's still unanswered questions. We don't know what happened to Sennacherib's army. They could have all gotten pneumonic plague and just dropped like flies. We don't know why they all died. But it is clear that Sennacherib did not go back, let's say, just victorious. He wasn't a clear he wasn't a clear victor, and nobody really wins a siege either. From Hezekiah's point of view, Jerusalem would have suffered greatly under that siege of Sennacherib. So, there's no clear winner in that conflict, but there was some who won more than others. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the question. It's a very interesting question. Okay, our second non-super chat question comes from Jacob Testa, and he asks, "Is it true that we've actually found the mummies of ancient Egyptian pharaohs?" Oh yes, many of them. I think the body of Ramses II is the most famous one. Well, it's probably not the most famous one. It's one of the most famous ones. I think probably the most famous mummy is the mummy of King Tutankhamun, King Tut. And that's because he was found with all his goodies. You know, most, like, for example, the mummy of Ramses II was found at the Deir el-Bahri cache, DB 320. But, like a lot of the royal mummies were actually found in that cache, which had like, you know, I think it was 20 or 40 mummies. I mean, that's what priests did with a lot of mummies that were where their tombs were raided. Their tombs couldn't be secured. So what they did was, you know, when a tomb was badly robbed, the priests would, you know, take the mummy, make sure it was properly identified, so they would actually write the name of the person on the mummy, try to fix up their, you know, the painting on it or the coffin as best they could. And then they put it in this single tomb, DB 320, which was always constantly protected. Because through most of the New Kingdom period, Deir el-Bahri was still a functioning temple. It was a temple that was very, very well monitored, very easy to protect, and that tomb was right in the courtyard of it. So anyone attempting to rob from DB 320 would have easily been caught. So, but thanks to DB 320, we do have a lot of royal mummies. We got, say, Amenhotep II, Tutmosis III, you know, Ramses II, Ramses III, you know, a lot of mummies were found there. So, yeah, we got actually a high percentage of mummies that were both, say, kings and great queens. Not so much the lesser queens. We don't have as many mummies of the lesser queens because we don't actually know where all of those were buried. Some people suspect that there's more queens buried in, say, the Valley of the Queens, but efforts to find that in Queens Valley has not exactly been fruitful. I'm thinking there's probably another royal, one or two actually, further royal necropoli, and that's a City of the Dead, around that area of Deir el-Medina. So I think we're going to find more. And I think, like, for example, in the Valley of the Monkey, I think we're going to find a lot more. I'm just not sure yet how much more. So, very interesting. It's a very interesting, and we have so many of these kings. And it's had some really unexpected consequences. Like, we can do genetic testing on them, see who's exactly related to whom. And that's been fascinating. Really, really interesting. So anyway, thank you for the non-super chat question. It was an interesting question. And but yeah, we've got lots of mummies from Egyptian kings. Particularly, as I said, dynasties 18 and 19. We even have some from dynasty 17. So yeah, fair number. Okay, question number 3. Hi, Dr. Falk, and this is from Boomer. What can you say about the context of the story of Jonah? Was the Assyrian Empire like in that day, and who was its king? Thank you so much for your work. Okay. Our best identification for Jonah actually comes from 2 Kings, and I'm just up here. Jonah, son of Amittai. Here we go. Okay. And this is how we date Jonah, is from 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25. And we read here, this is Jeroboam II. Okay, Jeroboam II restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath as far as the Sea of the Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai. Now, this is the same Jonah of the book of Jonah, the prophet who was of Gath-Hepher. Okay? Now, this is, because this is the reign of Jeroboam, this particular period of time is highly, or Jeroboam II, it's highly datable. It's easily dated. Jeroboam reigned between 782 and 753 BC. Now, there were two Assyrian kings that ruled during that period. Shalmaneser IV and Ashur-dan III. Now, this is not a great time for the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian kingdom at this time was in sort of bad states. It was facing opposition on all sides. It was also let's see now. There was plague. Like, for example, during Ashur-dan III, there was a plague. It was in a tough shape. It was in real tough shape. So, this was not during one of its imperial periods. In fact, it's going to be like 3 reigns from, say, Shalmaneser IV, until we get, say, Tiglath-Pileser III, who really is the guy who makes Assyria great again. So, this is one of those times when it's not in its imperial period. It's being hemmed in on all sides by enemies. It's being weakened. It's just not in a good state. In fact, it's in a terrible state at this time. So, that's the context of the Book of Jonah. Jonah is arriving into a Assyrian kingdom that is in trouble and is down on its luck, essentially. So, anyway, thank you much for that great question. Very interesting question, and fortunately, one we can easily date too and pin down. So, we don't always get these, but great question when it happens. Okay, Sumatos Patui, good to see you here tonight, friend. I do wish I could pronounce your handle better here, but PTs are always. I always want to say it like Ptolemy, so it's like I always want to pronounce this Tusmatos Tui, and that's probably not correct, but that's sort of that's my Egyptian training here kicking in. So I try at least, but it's good to see you here tonight. And he asks, early Hebrew epigraphy seems to use a modified hieratic system to write numerals. Yes, it did. Centuries passed before they moved to Aramean numerals. Is this best explained by Israelite origins in Egypt? Not necessarily. Okay. Now, I am a great fan of data that does actually point to Israelite origins in Egypt, and I think there's a lot of it. However, we also have to remember too that in Canaan, at least since the Middle Kingdom, Egyptian armies would come in, they'd conquer, they'd collect tribute, they'd leave. In the case of the New Kingdom, they would actually leave garrison towns, and at those garrison towns, they left Egyptian accountants, scribes. Egyptian scribes were assigned to the garrison towns, and at those garrison towns really only served, well, 3 purposes. They had a minor Egyptian army that wasn't supposed to get involved, but it was there more for, say, military support when the king went on campaign. So it really wasn't to flex the muscle, but it was more. They were more of monitoring stations, and to collect tribute. So that was their purpose, these garrison towns. But in their purpose in collecting tribute, you did have these scribes having to record all this tribute, including their numerical values. So, in order to be consistent with the collection attribute, the numerical system that the Egyptians used by the scribes was also adopted by the local population. So, it was just, I think it was just more or less one of these matters of convenience. Because the Egyptian used a hieratic numerical system, the local population did too. So, I don't think it's best explained by origins in Egypt. I think it's best explained by the presence of the garrison towns. But, the fact is, it does show that there was still an Egyptian influence caused even by those garrison towns. So anyway, thank you for that question. Very interesting question. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see how the numerical system in Canaan changes over time. So, wonderful question. Okay, that's it right now for the non-super chats. We're now going to get into the super chats, and we have got a lot of them. So, our first super chat is from Kenneth Vaughn for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. For a friend. Oh, of course it's for a friend. For a friend, huh? Sure. Likely story. Are the hailstorms in Joshua 10:11 problematic, considering hailstones are most likely not casualty events? Could it kill more than an army? Okay. Let's bring up that text here. So it is Joshua 10:11. And the Bible here. And it came about as they fled before Israel, while they were at the descent of Beth Horon, that the Lord threw large stones from heavens on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more died from the hailstones than those whom the son of Israel killed with the sword. Okay. Now, hail can be really nasty. Okay? Yes, most are not high casualty events. But that's because most hailstones are pea-sized. Okay? Now, one of the things I used to be really, really into, because it used to really fascinate me, was freaky weather events. Freaky weather events. So there was a time when I used to, look up, say, in old newspapers, odd historical odd weather events. And, of course, hailstones, very, very interesting. And there are reports of 100-pound hailstones and heavier. I think the largest hailstone on record was like 1,000 pounds. And it wasn't many of them. It was just one. But it was like the size of a small automobile. Okay? But you do get rare occasions, it doesn't happen often, but rarely, of 100-pound hailstones. Now, a 100-pound hailstone is not very big physically. It's only about, size of a 10-gallon fish tank, if you can think of it like that. Water is, about 8 pounds per gallon. You're talking 10 gallons, roughly. So, that's not that huge. Now, if you look at, say, for example, the hailstones, or not hailstones, sling stones that slingers use in the ancient Near East, they're made of stone, and, you put them in a sling and you swing them around and you fire them at the enemy. They're not that big. They're only the size of like a hardball, like a baseball. Okay? Now, those are a lot less than 100 pounds. But, boy, that could leave a dent in your head if it hits you. Especially if it's coming down with the acceleration of gravity. If it's coming down with the acceleration of gravity, that's going to break bones. Okay? So you don't need a really big hailstone to do a lot of damage. In fact, I remember my wife... my mother. My mother was telling me about a hailstorm hailstorm that she went through as a child, and those hailstones were 1 inch. Those hailstones were 1 inch, and she said it left dents in their truck. Okay. Now, when you have a 1950s truck, and the hail is leaving dents in your truck, you can kind of understand that there's some pretty good impact involved there. So yeah, there's a lot of damage that can be done by hail. So again, depends upon how dense the hail is, in far as how much space there's between the hail, how big the hailstones are. As I said, a 4 or 5 pound hailstone will make a mess of your day, and it's not very big. So yeah, it could do some serious damage on an army, especially in, say, that day and age, where, say, people they might have a bronze helmet, but bronze is not a particularly hard metal. It's not a particularly hard metal. So, you take a hailstone to a bronze helmet, it's going to dent and continue going into the side of your head. Just, it's not a pretty thing. Just not a pretty thing. It's not really until the invention of, say, steel helmets where it would provide, say, some adequate protection for, say, against, say, sling stones or even hail, as it were. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Fascinating question. But yeah, we got lots of recorded events like this of hailstones, like killing farm animals and that sort of thing. So, it does happen. It has been recorded, and it's just freaky weather. So, okay, our next super chat is from Brick Creation for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Hi, Dr. Falk. Any ancient sources that confirm 1,000 years in apocalyptic literature could mean a drastically very long period of time? Any ancient sources to confirm 40 years being an idiom? Yes. The latter, definitely. Okay? And so with the former, too. Okay, we do see this in the former as well. Okay? Now, I'll take the latter one first here, because the one that confirms in the idiom, 40 years as an idiom, is the Moabite stela. Okay? Where in King Mesha describes Omri reigning his 40. Okay, it's clear from this that Omri didn't reign 40; he reigned 12 years. Okay, so it's very, very clear from the Moabite stone that that 40 is an idiom. And we find this idiom used throughout the Bible. It would be just the most amazing coincidence if every use of 40 in the Old Testament was literal. Okay, because it's a number that occurs so often. It would just be a statistical improbability. Okay. We also do find things like for example, King David reigning 40 years. And then Absalom, after returning from exile, waits 40 years and then approaches his father David. Okay, there's an issue there. You can't have David's reign be 40 years and then from the beginning of the reign to the return of Absalom, okay, another 40 years starts, and then while David's still alive, 40 years passes. Right? So, that's an idiom that's a someone's using an idiom here. Someone's using an idiom, and in this particular case, it happens to be the 40 years that Absalom waits is the idiom here. Now, we do find ancient sources that also talk about 1,000 in sort of as a drastically long period of time. And we find this in patristic sources, where we do find this. And they'll mention that even in the early church fathers, they'll mention that the 1,000 years is not necessarily a literal 1,000 years. we also find it used in, say, the Bible as an idiom as well. The famous verse, 1,000 years is like a day to the Lord, and a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years. In both respects, it's not meant to be literal here, but it's meant to be an idiom to say, an exceptionally long period of time. Okay, so again, in that particular passage, it's not meant to be literal. It's meant to be an idiom. So there's definitely sources that support both those idioms. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Good question too. Okay, the third super chat is from Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Keeping the pyramids in mind, can you steelman the case for a global flood? Answers in Genesis can't, so they claim 8 men made enough stuff in 150 years to build them after. Well, Answers in Genesis here has a very odd view on this. Okay, we'll get into that in a moment. I'll read the rest of your comment here. And Answers in Genesis, so far as I know, ignores the fact that Egyptian language and culture had to also be saved through the flood, even though there were none left after then. I highly doubt some white marble and gold capstone would have survived a flood, unless it wasn't a flood and it was just a series of local floods that were devastating. Okay. Now, you could steelman a global flood. Okay, you can steelman this. Is this possible? It just isn't possible with American young Earth creationism. And the problem with American young Earth creationism is it reads those genealogies very, very literally to get a flood date of around 2350 BC. That's a very problematic date because of the pyramids. Now, interestingly enough, you talk to the guys in Answers in Genesis. And I have talked to them. They can answer. They're all prepped to answer your questions on dinosaurs. They're all cool with dinosaurs. They'll answer your questions on the global flood. Okay, fair enough. They've got pat answers for that. You ask them a question on the pyramids, you get some very nervous looks. Very nervous looks. They don't like that question. And their treatment of this has not been consistent. It's been very inconsistent, in fact. Let me put it to you this way. Most of what Answers in Genesis bases its explanation for the pyramids on is actually on some work done by David Down. Now, who is David Down? He's a missionary. He was a pastor. He did one correspondence course in archaeology. Okay? But he decided to write a whole bunch of apologetic books to try to explain ancient Egypt in terms of the Genesis flood. Now, they have other writers too that basically follow a similar argument to David Down, like Elizabeth Mitchell. Now, Elizabeth Mitchell, they put Dr. Elizabeth Mitchell. She's a medical doctor. She's an MD. Okay? And likewise, when they talk about the pyramids, they sometimes will bring up Nathaniel Jeanson, who has a PhD in cell and developmental biology. But he's not a historian. And when he starts talking about, like, the ancient Egyptians, it's not a historical. It goes into genetics of people groups. It's almost like they're afraid of the question. Now, what these people have in common is, like, for example, Mitchell and Down base their view on a very, very fringe theory that was proposed by Donovan Corville. And I happen to have a diagram here of Corville's chronology. This is Corville's chronology. So what he's doing here is he's overlapping dynasties in a very, very strange way. Like, for example, he has dynasties 1 and 2 happening at the same time as dynasties 3, 4, and 5. So essentially, he's having Narmer take place, or not Narmer, like, for example, Waset, king of dynasty 2, happen at the same time as King Khufu is building his pyramid. And you'll also see the patriarchs, are being sort of coming into Egypt, at the same time as the Pyramid Age. So you have, say, Egypt's Old Kingdom overlapping with the patriarchs, and then the Egyptian sojourn happening at the same time as the Middle Kingdom. There's this 40-year gap. And then you have, say, the Judges happening during the Second Intermediate Period, and then the Israelite monarchy happening during, like, the height of the Egyptian Empire. Dynasties 18 and 19. It's crazy. This is an absolutely wacko chronology. But it's the underpinning of what, is this essentially what, say, Mitchell and Down represents? And because it's what they represent, and it's what Answers in Genesis is essentially stating, they're between a rock and a hard place. They're really between a rock and a hard place. And they're really between a rock and a hard place on this because, they can, try to sort of hum and haw and basically go avoid the question. That's been their general tactic when it comes to engaging the pyramids. Answers in Genesis generally avoids the question. Tries to deflect. Tries to change the subject. Like, for example, with Jeanson. Oh, let's talk about the pyramids. Oh, this is great. A great discussion about, the genetics of people groups. Well, it never answered the question of the age of the pyramids. In Elizabeth Mitchell's article, she talks about how we can doubt the chronology of ancient Egypt, but never then dates the pyramids. It's really slippery. It's really, you want to, as I say, if you want to make a Answers in Genesis guy really, really squirm, talk about pyramids, not dinosaurs. They'll squirm. They'll absolutely squirm. Okay. Now, because of that, you cannot steelman a global flood. It's really hard to do. You can steelman a continental young Earth creation scheme because they're not holding hard and fast to that 2350 BC date. So because they're not holding hard and fast to it, you can steelman a continental young Earth creationist view. Okay? That you can do. You can steelman an old Earth creationist view. Okay? And still make this all consistent with the pyramids. In both cases, yeah, no problem here. But once you actually steelman American young Earth creationism to make it consistent with the pyramids, you'll run into difficulties. Really, really difficult problems. I don't think it's possible, honestly. You could do your best, and I think Answers in Genesis has done basically the best resource they can in this particular case. They've done the best they could. Okay, yeah, I get they all believe they believe in this American young Earth creationism, and I don't actually have that big of a philosophical problem with it, but it's a historical problem, and the only thing they can do is avoid the question. It's really the only thing. They'll be able to handle dinosaur answers all day long. Pyramids, that's their Achilles heel. So, anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate the question. Tried to answer that the best I could. Unfortunately, there's limits to what the data can give us here. So, all right. Next super chat is from Pseudo Anubis for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Could you explain the Ba-Ka distinction in ancient Egyptian thought? Yeah, sure. Okay. It's probably easiest to start with the Ba. Now, the Ba is a bird-shaped spirit. It's the personality. It's the Egyptians' deplorable sense of humor. It's their passions. It's their emotional seat. It's everything emotional about the person. That's the Ba. Okay? The Ka is the life energy. It's the living essence. Some like Rosalie David will say, for example, that it's the double. It's the double of the person. So the Ka is the life energy. The Ba is the personality, and there's one more. There's an Ak, and the Ak is the intellect. This is the thinking portion of the person. Okay, so that's a brief answer to that question. And both are all of these are important in aspects in the Egyptian concept of the person. And for the Egyptians, the person is many things. It is the it's your shadow, it's your body, it's all these sorts of different components. So it's a very interesting kind of metaphysical way of viewing a person, of all these different aspects. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. But that's the long and the short of it. Ba is your emotions. It's your feelings. Your feelings. And the Ka is your life energy. So thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, next super chat is from technical difficulty here. Just a second. Okay, let's see how bad that went. That should be okay. I just need to make sure I didn't lose anything. Just a second. Okay, didn't lose any super chats. Okay. Yeah, I have a loader here that shows it on my screen, all the chats on the screen, but it also sometimes acts up, doesn't behave properly. So I have to nursemaid it sometimes. So anyway, another super chat here from Pseudo Anubis. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he asks, it is often said that pharaohs were worshipped as living gods during their own lifetimes, not just after death. To what extent was this true, if at all? Actually, it's only really true for a very short period of time. Okay? It is true between the reigns of Amenhotep III and Ramses XI. That's the only period. So the tail end of Dynasty 18, all of Dynasty 19, and all of Dynasty 20. Okay. Now, what happens before Amenhotep III is that the kings were God in potential. They weren't actually God. Okay, but they become a god. So they're God in potential, but not really a god. Not until a death. So that was sort of the state of affairs up until, say, Amenhotep III. Now, in the case of Amenhotep III, he starts borrowing symbols and stuff from temple furniture and starts decorating his own furniture with this, essentially turning his throne into this sort of sacred space. And it's at that point where the kings of Egypt don't just become gods in potential, but gods in actuality. Okay? And that continues really until the end of Dynasty 20. Now, what happens at the end of Dynasty 20 is you have some very, very not so good kings. Egypt loses its hegemony. It loses its holdings on Canaan and in Nubia, in Kush. And the last king of Dynasty 20 loses his marbles. He goes insane. Okay, and that's Ramses XI. He completely loses his mind. He lives a long time, but he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. They have to declare a Weka Mesut. And basically, a Weka Mesut is a state of affairs where somebody else has to take over the duties of the king because he's unable to fulfill it, but he's not dead yet. So he's either incapacitated or he's mentally nuts. So that's what happened to Ramses XI. But this basically split the kingdom. So you had the successors to Ramses XI ruling in the Nile Delta, like Semendes. But then you had the priests of Karnak. And they're going, this king is no god. He's a lunatic. You know? He's just... What kind of god is this? And they at that point, they declare essentially the equivalent of no god but Amun-Re. So at that point, the kings of Egypt lose their status as living gods. And it sort of returns to the former status quo of god in potential. So, anyway, so that's sort of the status of that question. Is it happens in a very short period of time, from Amenhotep III of Dynasty 18 up until the end of Dynasty 20, and after that it ceases. Q&A. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Great question. Okay. Hey, mouthwash for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. What's your take on the missing verses in Jeremiah's Dead Sea Scroll, original or late? And how do they figure in terms of inspiration? I don't think the New Testament quotes any. I haven't looked at this issue, honestly. Jeremiah is not a book I go into that frequently, so I'm not really that aware of all the authorship issues that are involved with the book of Jeremiah. So unfortunately, I kind of have to say that I can't give you a great answer on this one, because I just haven't had a chance to look into it. I do read a whole lot, but there's so much I do have to cover that I just can't cover everything. So, this is one I'm going to have to say you stumped me on, because I just haven't looked at it. So, I'm sorry. I wish I could have given you a better answer. I do really appreciate the super chat, though. Thank you very much for the super chat. Sorry I couldn't give you a better answer. But I can't. I just don't know everything. I wish I did. It'd be convenient, but unfortunately I don't know everything. I'm not a god. So, omniscience is beyond me. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Andrew Goulet for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Where do the invasions of the Sea People fit into the conquest of Canaan? Eric Klein has suggested that the Sea Peoples may have softened the targets in Canaan for the Israelites to conquer them. Yeah, actually, I don't disagree with him here. Now, I do disagree with Klein on some things. I've met Klein several times. He doesn't know me from Adam, but we have met and we have talked. But he actually, I know his book says, the Bronze Age collapse was in 1177. He really thinks it's 1184. The book cover says 1177 for marketing reasons. Okay. Now, I think that the invasion, the conquest of Canaan by the sea peoples, especially the coastal plain, plays a very important role in, say, the conquest of Israel by the Israelites. What you get with the conquest of the coastal plain is, say, on the west, you have the Philistines and the sea peoples. In the east, you've got the Israelites coming in. Okay? And the Canaanites are squeezed in between. They're having to fight a war on two fronts. Okay? They're having to fight the Philistines on the west and the Israelites on the east. Okay? So it definitely softened it. And the Canaanite cities were not in a great state to begin with. They had undergone a very, very intense depopulation during Middle Bronze II. So they were not in a good state. They were in a very, very poor state. It's just... and this was just sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. So what we see with the invasion of the Sea Peoples is they're starting to come in to the coastal plain. We see the first reference to their sort of attempts to raid unsuccessfully during the reign of King Akhenaten. That's our first mention of a Sea People's tribe. And they sort of they do that first incursion, and it's not successful, but they're already putting their toe in the water during the reign of Akhenaten. By the reign of Ramses II, and definitely the reign of Merneptah, they're already established on the coastal plain. Okay? So this is a really important factor, because when the Egyptians go on campaign and they enter into the Judean foothills, they have to usually go up the coastal plain through the Jezreel Valley and back down into the Judean foothills. So that's the normal route for an Egyptian campaign. If the Egyptians have trouble holding on to that coastal plain, they're not going to have much success dealing with the, the Judean foothills. So we already basically see during mid-Dynasty 19 that the signs of weakness are already there in Egypt. They're already there at the end of the reign of Ramses II and during the reign of Merneptah. Signs of weakness are already there. So, anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Hey. Andrew Goulet again for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. The bronze serpent from Exodus is similar to the staff of Aesculapius, the Greek god of healing. Yeah, there's a cosmetic similarity there. A snake around it. Does this point to Jewish influence on Greek culture and religion? Not necessarily. I think one of the things we're dealing with here is convergent symbolism. Now, the Aesculapius cult begins around the 6th century BC. So that does seem a little early for, say, Jewish influence. But in the 7th century BC, there's already a Greek trading colony at Naucratis, which is in the Nile Delta. So it doesn't rule out Egyptian influence. But it's really hard to be sure exactly what the origin of, say, the bronze serpent or the serpent of Aesculapius is, honestly. So it could be Egyptian, might be Jewish. There could have been some diaspora Jews because they did travel widely. So, 6th century BC. Yeah, with the Assyrian invasion and deportations in 722 BC. Possible. Hard to say for certain, though. It's very, very hard to say for certain. So that's probably the best I can answer that. I'm not that up on my Greek mythology, so I also have to admit that there's a weakness there too. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Andrew Goulet again for $10. You mentioned in a previous video that leprosy lives in the deserts of Egypt. Yeah, it's actually pretty worldwide, but Egypt especially. Why doesn't it exist in other deserts as well, like Arizona and Nevada? What does it live on? Now, it's actually in Arizona and Nevada too. Okay? One of the very interesting vectors to contract leprosy is actually from armadillos. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows why contact with armadillos can give you leprosy, which is today called Hansen's disease. Okay. So yeah, some of the vectors for leprosy are quite mysterious. It's thought that one of the reasons why, for example, you find it in poor countries like you do, like for example, the two places that have the greatest outbreaks of leprosy today are Brazil and India. A lot of that is because people don't wear shoes. You also find it a lot in sub-Saharan Africa too, but it's also in Egypt. People do contract it in Egypt. It's part of the natural bacteria found in soil. It is in North America. It is in Europe. It's found globally. It's not a particularly virulent disease. Okay? 95% of people who come in contact with leprosy never catch the disease. It's also got a very long incubation period too, of 5 to 20 years. So, it does exist. It does exist in North America. It does exist in North American deserts. Part of the reason why we don't get as much people contracting it is we tend to wear shoes. We don't generally walk in the desert in sandals, most of us. Most of us put on hiking boots if we go out to, say, the Nevada desert. Just because, there's other things out there too, like scorpions and snakes and that sort of thing. So, we're not likely to have an open sore on our foot come in contact with the soil. It's just not likely to as much to happen in, say, North America and Europe. Oddly enough, Canada does not report any cases of leprosy. That might have something to do with the weather, being cold and wet. So, a lot of it is a lot of the cases of leprosy just comes down to, say, cultural things, such as poverty. Do you wear shoes? Do you have contact with other people who have the disease? That sort of thing. So, anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Great question. I don't get that one very often, but very interesting question nonetheless. So thank you very much for that super chat. Okay. Andrew Goulet again for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. In your opinion, during whose judgeship did Merneptah attack Israel? Why wouldn't the Chronicler of Judges mention it? Okay, those are two questions, and I'll basically take the first one, which is what didn't happen during a judgeship. It happened during the conquest. So this is before the period of the judges. So this happens roughly, and I'm saying very roughly, roughly the 5th year of the conquest. So that's when that incident takes place. So during the 5th year of the Israelite conquest, they've attacked and destroyed Jericho. They've attacked and destroyed Ai. At that point now they're coming back to Shiloh and they're divvying up the land. So why wouldn't it be mentioned in Judges? Well, a couple reasons why. One, it's really, first of all, it wouldn't be in Judges, it would be in Joshua. Because according to the time periods, that's where we would find it. It'd be in Joshua, not Judges. So we wouldn't expect to find it in Judges anyway. Okay. So with that said, however, in Joshua, what we have here is the organization of the book of Joshua, basically oriented between bad tribes and good tribes. Okay, so Joshua is organized in a pedagogical kind of way to teach a lesson. Basically, tribe of Judah, good. Tribe of Dan, bad. And everyone else is a spectrum in between. So, with that, the attack of Merneptah may not actually play significantly in that narrative. The other thing is that Judges 2, the attack of Merneptah might not have been as significant as Merneptah leaves on. Now, Merneptah is, like all kings of the ancient Near East, is given to hyperbole. Okay? So, we find this in the Bible too, where certain feats are exaggerated. The whole, say, for example, destroying the Canaanites utterly. Well, they didn't destroy them utterly. They're intermarrying with them. They're taking their gods. They're living in communities with them. Well, they didn't destroy them utterly. That's hyperbole. It's wartime hyperbole. And Merneptah did this too. When he says, I wiped out the seed of Israel is no more. Well, that's obviously not true. So we don't know the actual extent of his interaction. Unfortunately, the Cour de Cachet wall, which actually probably shows where his conflict with the Israelites is badly damaged at the top, where that incident would have been shown. So we just don't know to what extent that was, that sort of interaction took place. But really, most of the time, when a chronicler doesn't mention an event, and what we consider to be an important event, it's because it just isn't relevant to what they're trying to say. I'll give you a great example of this. One of the most famous battles in Israel's history, probably the most important battle, one of the most important battles in Israel's history, was the Battle of Karkar. You have King Ahab with a coalition of other, kings in the area, fighting the Assyrians and winning. They win this battle. And it's a major victory. And we only know that they won because the Assyrians recorded that they won. But it's not recorded in the Bible anywhere. The Battle of Karkar is not in the Bible. But it's an indisputable historical fact. It's one of the most important Bibles in the Old Testament period, or important battles in the Old Testament period. But it's not mentioned anywhere. It's not mentioned in Kings. It's not mentioned in Chronicles. We don't know why it wasn't mentioned. Terribly significant event, historically. The chronicler didn't care. Wasn't of interest to him. They didn't record it. So we don't always know why the chronicler chooses the events he does, but he is doing it for a reason. Sometimes it's very apparent why he's doing it. Sometimes it isn't. So anyway, this is just one of the mysteries of Scripture. We just sometimes don't know, why certain events get omitted and certain things get, included. But it is ultimately done for a reason, even if we don't know right now exactly what that reason is. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, we're now on to the Twidget. And our next super chat is from Sinaiticus Apologia for $100. Thank you very much for that extremely generous super chat. You're keeping our channel going. You really are, and we really appreciate the support you've given us. Your support has been fantastic, and we very, very much appreciate all you do for us, because you've become an important source. And this is not to diminish any of the other super chats. Every super chat is important, but you've been really helping us out here in ways that you can't even imagine. So thank you very, very much for that very generous super chat. Okay. Nephilim before the flood. Nephilim after the flood. What's going on here? Did the Nephilim survive the flood, or did something else happen? Something else happened. Okay? Now, we should define what Nephilim are. Here's one of those areas where I take a departure from Michael Heiser. And everyone needs to know that before I answer this question. I don't agree with Heiser's view on the Nephilim. Heiser believes that the Nephilim are the products of angels, angelic beings, sons of God, intermarrying with mortal men to produce this demigod angelic being called the Nephilim. Okay? I don't hold that. Okay? That's not a view I subscribe to. I think it's a deeply problematic view in a lot of ways. Now, what's less controversial is what is the meaning of the word Nephilim. It comes from the Hebrew root nephil, and nephil means to fall. So these are the fallen ones. Now, that's an interesting statement, especially when you take it in a late bronze context with the sons of God. Because when you see that sons of God thing, you do see in various texts of the ancient Near East sons of various gods, and they're priests or priestesses. Daughters in the case of priestesses, sons in the case of priests. Okay? So you do have, for example, the sons of Ishtar. Who are the sons of Ishtar? It's a special caste of Mesopotamian priest. You have every Egyptian king called the son of Re, because he's the head high priest of every cult in Egypt. So sons of God is actually a reference to priests. Okay. So then, in the context of, say, Mesopotamian culture, priests often take a special sexual vow, okay, called the naditum vow. Okay. This is a vow to be celibate during the time of their priestly service. Now, they had a taboo, not necessarily taboo. What's it called? Superstition. They had a superstition. The Mesopotamians believed in this superstition that if someone holding a naditum vow breaks that vow and conceives a child, that child will end up having disastrous results upon the society. So it was incumbent upon the parent of that child to kill the child. Sargon of Akkad is probably the paragon example here. Because he was the son of an naditum priestess who broke her vow. and she sets him in a basket and shoves him down the Euphrates, where he gets, picked up by a farmer. Yeah, at least that's how the 7th century story goes. Whether or not any of that is actually true, we don't know, because it's such a late story. However, it does seem apparent that the Mesopotamians were deathly afraid of people taking this vow and breaking it. So, this is why I think we have Nephilim before the flood and Nephilim after the flood. Because what's happening is you have similar kinds of priestly castes. You have these castes happen before the flood, where we got these people who are acting as priests, sons of God. They're taking these vows, and then they're breaking them. And that's leading to disastrous results before the flood. You're having the same thing happening after, where you're also still getting these priests who, I'll take this, because actually I'm going to just take this first side check, because I think we just actually answered that. Which is, Brendan O'Brien, how does this view harmonize with them being characterized as men of renown, though? Sargon of Akkad. Okay? This is a guy who became the cupbearer of a king, killed the king, usurped his throne, and then ate up a half dozen kingdoms in Mesopotamia. Okay? The guy went on a rampage, of conquest. Okay? This was one of the fears. This was the fear that the product of a broken Aditum vow would just wreak absolute havoc on the stability of a society. And because they were seen to be greater, they were seen to have much more power. Again, it's a superstition, but it's a superstition that they did hold to. So that's how it harmonizes. Is we do see this in the late Bronze Age literature, where, like, for example, we see this, for example, in the conquest of, like, Naram Sin. He's the offspring, the descendants of Sargon, and he still has that sort of, great divine power. We see that because he wears horns, the horns of a god. So absolutely, they are seen to be, great, mighty men because of that broken vow. So that's how it harmonizes. So anyway, back to the original here. Okay. So, yeah. So anyway, that's generally how we get there. Is we got a caste of priests. They're taking a vow of celibacy. Shouldn't, but they do. Take a vow of celibacy, break the vow, produce a child. Child wreaks havoc. That's your Nephilim. Is the product of that broken vow. And it is thoroughly consistent with the late Bronze Age literature. And this is one of the things I actually don't like about Heiser's view on this too, is he's harmonizing the passage with Second Temple period literature. And when we talk about a book like Genesis, we do have to remember that its origins, its source text, is late Bronze Age. It's not Second Temple period. It's almost like trying to harmonize it by the early church fathers. They're too late. They're writing out of a different context by that point. You have to take the comparative literature in accordance with its closest historical context. So if it's a late Bronze Age piece of literature, you need to compare it to late Bronze literature. If it's a Second Temple period literature, then compare it to Second Temple period literature. This is why I don't have actually a problem with Heiser's view on, say, the sons of God in the Book of Job. Because the Book of Job is actually closer to Second Temple period Judaism than it is to the late Bronze Age. So I have actually no problem with, the sons of God in Job referring to the divine council of gods. I have no problem with it at that point. But with that earlier literature, I think there's some issues. So anyway, thank you for that very generous support. I'm sure that question is going to get me into a lot of trouble with the Heiser fans. I agree with him. I do actually. The fact is, I do agree more with Heiser than I disagree with him. It's just on this particular point that does come up so often. It sounds like I'm really disagreeing with him frequently, and I'm not. I'm just on a very. It's just Bronze Age. Yeah, I'm a Bronze Age guy. I mean, I'm my concentration is in the Bronze Age. That's where I'm strong in my literature. That's where I'm strong in my reading, on my history, and thus when I see a piece of Bronze Age literature being compared to something much later, yeah, I kind of I noticed that. So anyway, thank you for that awesome super chat. Thank you for supporting this channel. It's such a blessing to have supporters like you that really help us out. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you so very much. Okay. We now have a $20 super chat from Sean Horton. Thank you very much for that super chat. He says, I'm on board with the Old Testament reading to be preached on thoroughly. Well, thank you. But one problem is time. Besides removing half of the sermon that is a personal anecdote, how does one preach faster through more Bible? Well, I think here the goal of the pastor shouldn't be to preach faster, but to preach more thoroughly. It's okay to take less of the Bible, but teach it more. Get more out of it. Get more out of it. You know, one of the things I think it's in Eastern Orthodox services where I believe it's Eastern Orthodox services where they basically, before they do like a Bible reading, they'll say, let us pay attention. Let's pay attention. The whole idea of a good expository sermon is you're digging in deep. You're getting the fullness of the meaning out. And yeah, remove the personal anecdotes. Personal anecdotes are really pretty worthless for responsible teaching. But I also think too that you do have to balance this. You know, balance the Old Testament with the New Testament. If you don't, you end up getting, say, lopsided teaching. You end up getting lopsided teaching. Your church effectively becomes a Marcionite church. And that's got its own problems. You don't want the preaching to imply that the Old Testament has no value. So, I think it's very, very responsible to do both. You know, you have to, because both are divine revelation. Both are the Word of God. Old Testament is just as much the Word of God as the New Testament. Just as much. And while you can't do, say, you know, I mean, half and half, I think that's a pretty good balance, honestly. If you do half your sermons on the Old Testament and half your sermons on the New Testament, I think that's actually a great formula. I think that's actually great. You know, basically, you know, devote 8 weeks to a New Testament book or books, and then devote 8 weeks to the Old Testament. And then go back to the New Testament where you left off. You know, switch between them. You know, I think this is a really good way of approaching it. So I don't think you want to go faster. You don't want to go faster. For most of most congregations, you know, a 20-minute sermon is probably, if it's well done and well presented, is more than sufficient. It's more than sufficient, and you've got enough time there to really bring out a pericope to its fullness. You know, you've done your study of Greek or Hebrew. You're in deep into the text. You understand the text thoroughly. You can bring out the salient points and then you can then, explain it to your congregation, and then apply it to their lives. That's the core of expository preaching. Understand the text, explain the text, apply the text, and stay within the confines of the text. That's very important. You don't want to go off into proof texting or topical preaching, at least not on as a regular diet. One of my pet peeves is topical preaching. I really can't stand topical preaching. I understand it's sometimes necessary. Like if you're doing a special focused subject, sometimes topical preaching is good. As a regular diet, it leads to proof texting. Quickly becomes what the pastor is trying to preach, not what the text is trying to preach. And one of the great things about Scripture is Scripture preaches itself. Preaching is a very difficult endeavor. It's a very difficult endeavor. It's a difficult endeavor to do it well. But if you do it well, what the great thing about it is the pastor ends up learning something. And your congregation is limited by the growth of your pastor. The more your pastor grows, the more your congregation grows. If you get stuck in a frame of thinking, if your pastor sort of gets stuck at a level where he's only preaching the messages he wants to preach, then your congregation won't grow. It won't grow to maturity. And I don't mean size, I mean maturity. Okay? That's a big difference. You can have a 10-person church where every person in that congregation can teach competently and like they were pastors themselves. You can have a 10,000-person church where everyone is still drinking spiritual milk. Yeah. Which is the better church? Which is the healthier church? The 10-person church or the 10,000-person church? It's the 10-person church that's the healthy church. And it's because they've been grown to maturity. And they grow to maturity because the pastor is growing to maturity because he's going deeper, not faster. So it's not a problem to go through the text, say the New Testament, more slowly. If you're getting the Old Testament too. Not a problem at all. It's all the Word of God. It's all important. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. And it's a very important question. It's a really important question. I wish more people would ask that question. Because it's just, I think it's one of the problems we face in the church today is people are trying to go fast. They're trying to be a schedule, but they're not going deep. And people need to go deep. The pastor needs to go deep to learn so that he can grow, so that he can raise his congregation up to be mature believers. So thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Destiny Knight 77 for $9.99. Thank you very much for that super chat. Shalom, Dr. Falk. Well, shalom, Shabbat shalom to you too. For an aspiring student, are there any books, scholars, or resources you would recommend for studying about ancient Near Eastern history and religion? Ooh. Well, there's lots. Unfortunately, let's see here. Ancient Near Eastern history, there is the backgrounds to the Old Testament book, which is excellent. Kenneth Kitchen writes some good books on this. John Walton is excellent on this. There's many good resources out there. Most of them are in book form. Richard Hess, excellent author. I highly recommend Richard Hess's books. He gives an excellent overview of, say, Israelite religion. So, very funny guy too. I like Richard Hess. But yeah, he's excellent too. So yeah, there's a lot of really great resources. There's actually never been so many good resources right now on the ancient Near Eastern history and religion. Just there just has. I mean, there's lots of them right now. You can buy my book on the Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian context, an illustrated journey. That's a resource. It's a focus on Egypt, but it's still a resource. James Hoffmeyer has some good books out there. So yeah, a lot of good books, a lot of good resources, a lot of good books. So, so anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Another one I'd actually recommend is as an up and comer is Brent Strawn too. He wrote "The Old Testament is Dying." I think that's one of those books that every pastor should read. Especially for an aspiring student, it'll give you a really good, some good reasons why focusing on the Old Testament is so important. So, and there's also a pipe in here from Dr. Kenny Rhodes recommending The One Who Is. While I'm not sure that's an ancient Near Eastern history and religion, it is an excellent book. I will get granted that. Kenny Rhodes' book is very, very good. Having had the opportunity to peruse it myself now, it is excellent. Very well written. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. The Camel Leopard for $5. Thank you very much for that super chat. Shabbat Shalom. Well, Shabbat Shalom to you also. Could you explain Mark 10:18 in Trinitarian context? I've seen many Unitarians use this as their primary evidence. Okay. Go to Mark 10:18. Okay. Yep. Okay, we're blank. All right. I'm actually going to start at verse 17. And as he was setting out for a journey, this is talking about Jesus, a man ran up to him and knelt before him and began asking him, "Good teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." Okay. You know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother. And he said to him, "Teacher, I have kept all these things from my youth up." And looking at him, Jesus felt a love for him and said, "One thing you lack. Go forth and go and sell all your possessions and give them to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. And come follow me." But at these words his face fell, and he went away grieved, for he was one who owned much property. And Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard will it be for those who are wealthy to enter the kingdom of God?" And the disciples were amazed at him. But Jesus answered again and said to him, "Children, how hard is it to enter the kingdom of God? It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." And they were even more astonished and said to him, "Who then can be saved?" Looking upon them, Jesus said, "With men it is impossible, but with God, for all things are possible with God." Alrighty. Now, what we have here is here's not what Christ is saying, and I know what the Unitarians are going to be driving at here. Well, Christ cannot be good Therefore, because he's saying, why do you call me good? The inference is, I'm not good. No one is good except God, so therefore I'm not God. So this is what the Unitarians are probably going to take as their primary evidence. But that sort of misses the point of the passage. The passage is really not talking about, is Christ good? In fact, he's not denying that he's God, and he's not denying that he is good. What he's doing here is he's attacking this young man's concept of what is good. Okay? Because the very next verse, you know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Okay? Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother. And this guy has the parody is that, well, I've kept all of those since my youth. Yeah, sure you have, buddy. Uh-huh. Yeah. What Christ is doing here in the context of the passage is he's undermining this young man's concept of his own self-righteousness. That's what he's doing here. And he knows this going into the conversation. Okay? So, at the very outset of this conversation, he's saying, all right, what should I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said, why you call me good? It's a strange sort of question then to even sort of, that a pious Jew would even ask, to be honest. That good teacher, good rabbi, essentially. Agathos, good. Didaskalos, good. In the Hebrew, it would have been rabbi. So, Rabbi Tova or something like that. Essentially, you're a good rabbi. Okay? It's like, well, a very pious Jew in the first century would sort of know that this is not quite, copacetic. So he's starting off the young man's starting off the conversation with something that a very pious Jew wouldn't do. When, like, for example, in I think it's Luke, where Jesus says, he who has who has not sinned, cast the first stone. The old men drop their stones first, then the young hotheads, afterwards. That's because the old men knew the state of their sinfulness, because they were pious Jews. Here we got a guy with a distorted sense of what's good and his own goodness. So that's what Christ is doing here. He's not saying he's not good. He's providing here a rhetorical question. And frankly, it's a rhetorical question that is inclusive of himself. And he's saying, no one is good except God alone. He's not denying he's God. He's not denying that he's good. But he's giving a rhetorical question to undermine that concept of self-righteousness. And to show everyone around him that nobody is good enough to make it into heaven. Nobody is good enough to inherit eternal life. The text says, with man, it's impossible. With God, anything is possible. Even this is possible. Salvation is a God thing, not a your personal sense of righteousness thing. So, that's what's going on in the passage. It's a misuse of it by the Unitarians, and I think it's just, there's other verses too that point to Trinitarianism that even if this did stand up to their scrutiny and it doesn't, they'd have to deal with the other passages as well, and I think that's really, really problematic, like John 20, Acts chapter 5, etc. So, I'm not, like, in Isaiah 44, there's a lot of Trinitarian passages that I think that, Unitarians don't have a leg to stand on here. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and I hope that answered your question. Next one. Robert Lee just gives a super sticker. Oh, is there a question? Oh, okay, for $1. Well, thank you for that super sticker. And then there's a $5 super sticker underneath. Well, thank you very much. And there's a question underneath. Okay. Okay. Well, okay. So, for $6, thank you very much for the super chat. The super stickers. We don't get very many super stickers. We enjoy them. I find they're fun. But okay, so he asks, I heard from a so-called minister. Oh, that's a bad way to start a question. Saying that Leviticus 18:22 in its original language is talking about men with boys, not condemning homosexuality except in that context. What are your thoughts? My first thought is that this is going to get me into some serious trouble with YouTube community standards. Okay? I will read the passage. We will look at the passage. I have to also be very, very careful how I answer this question because of YouTube community standards, which takes a very dim look on this subject. I can say a lot of things. I can criticize a lot of things. I have to be really careful on this one. So if I use circumspect language, please understand, I'm doing it to stay within the guidelines of YouTube community standards. They're vengeful on this. So let's look at Leviticus here. 18. $22. Okay. How about you guys just read that for yourself and I just stay silent for a moment? Okay. All right. Now, let's just talk about this. Okay. There are some aspects of this passage that make that reading. I'm going to take the Hebrew here too because that'll probably skew someone here. Okay. A man. Okay. Back to the NASB. Okay. Now, first of all, it's not talking about boys. There's no reference to boys in this passage. None at all. Okay? No reference to boys. It's talking about males. Okay? Zakar. Zakar is a male. The you shall not lie is a second person masculine pronoun. So the subject pronoun here is second person masculine. So it's directed to you men. Okay? You are not, as a man, to lie with a man as one lies with essentially a woman. Okay? And not just a woman, a wife. Okay, this is Isha. It's a woman, it's a female, it's a wife. Okay? So there's heavy activity overtones here. Okay? Okay. Now, as far as it not condemning that activity, that's complete baloney. Complete baloney. And the reason why is that last bird abomination. Now, this is not like seafood. This is not disgusting. Like, for example, the prohibition against seafood. You shall not eat seafood. It is disgusting. Not that word. The word here for abomination is the word toivo. Now, in the Hebrew vocabulary, that's the worst of the worst. That is absolutely the worst thing you can call. That's the bottom of the barrel. It doesn't get worse than that in the Hebrew category system. You know, if you talk about, say, for example, the highest, you know, is kadesh, holy, and then you have kasher, clean or normal, and then you have unclean, and then you've got toivo. And actually, between unclean and toivo, you got disgusting too. But this is the harshest condemnation you can find in the Hebrew scriptures for anything. Okay. So without violating community standards, because I didn't say anything about the question, we can see here from the passage that this is directed to men, about men, towards men, in relation to the activities with a female. Okay? So yeah, I danced around that. I really danced around that. And that's because YouTube community standards are very draconian. And I do not want to go afoul of them. So I hope that answered your question as best as I could without getting into trouble. All right? If you find this video be demonetized and delisted, that's the reason. Okay? Because I didn't do if I didn't do a good enough job of dancing here, they'll delist this. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Rich OB. All right. Next super chat off. Is the Camel Leopard for $5. Thank you very much for that super chat. I read once that 40 could be idiomatic of a generation. In the respect that a generation can be a long time, yeah, perhaps, but it's very much idiomatic of an extensive, uncertain, long time. And it not just applies to say, like, for example, 40 years, but it could be 40 days. You know, you do see some references to 40 days and 40 nights, too. So, you know, there's other references also. Or when it's, like, multiply, like 40 times 12, you know, you'll see that as well. So if so, this would mean that Moshe lived about 3 generations. Well, that's possible, yeah. If it is being used idiomatically in that respect, yeah, that's not a bad interpretation. It's a lot better than going with the sort of the literal view here that Moshe actually lived a literal 120 years. I think this is a much better approach, and I don't have a huge problem with it in this respect. You know, and the only thing is you do see, as I said, with Omri, you know, he's only ruling 12 years. It's a very short period of time. No one would ever think that to be a generation. You know, you could have young generations, but that's sort of a little on the ridiculous side. So there is a few counterfactuals you have to deal with there. So anyway, yeah, I don't have as I say, I don't have a huge problem with that interpretation. I just think an idiom is just a sort of a better approach to it. Okay, so thank you very much for the super chat, very much appreciated. Dr. Kenny Rhodes, unofficial, for $1.99. Thank you for the super chat. Good to see you tonight. For falling asleep and missing your call. Yes. Yes, you didn't make me happy with that. Yeah. I think we're just gonna have to arrange it for a day. A time I've got a day off, and because I don't want you falling asleep on me again. It's just I think this what we need to discuss is too important to just leave that to falling asleep. I've had a couple people I've arranged appointment with just fall asleep on me. So you're not the first one to do this to me, but I do appreciate you making it up. Uh, very very much appreciate that, and I do accept the apology. So um, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciate it, and I do appreciate the apology and the making of amends also. So God bless you, brother. Okay, Camel Leopard for $5. Thank you again for your third super chat of the night. Wow. I would like to sponsor Resignador Hitata's question about the Pharaoh drowning in the Reed Sea. Okay, sure. Let's see. Let me find it here. Wait, come in before here. If I find that question. Okay, I think I found it here. Yeah. Okay. Shamunian said other time. Oh, maybe that's not the question. That's his follow up to it. Sure. Okay. Resignador, sorry. Hitita says, God bless you all. Sam Shamouni, among others, claim that the biblical text clearly states Pharaoh and all his army drowned. Thoughts? Okay. The biblical text doesn't state this. This is actually something that comes out of Islamic theology. It does not come out of the Bible. Now, Jewish tradition for a long time did claim that Pharaoh drowned. You still find it, for example, in the Seder, that Seder will say it. Now, you look at, say, the Exodus narrative, there's no evidence in there that Pharaoh drowned. Where do we get this from? We actually get this from the Psalms. And I will find that for you in just a second here. Okay, so it comes to us in the Psalm. All right. And it's Psalm 136. I will read this because this is where the passage, this is where most people get this idea that it's in the Bible. It's from this passage here. All right. Verse 11. And brought Israel out from their midst, for his loving kindness is everlasting. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm, for his loving kindness is everlasting. To him who divided the text here says Reed Sea, not Red Sea, asunder. For his loving kindness is everlasting. And he made Israel pass through the midst of it, for his loving kindness is everlasting. But he overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Reed Sea, for his loving kindness is everlasting. To him who led his people through the wilderness, for his loving kindness is everlasting. And the critical passage here is verse 15. But he overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Reed Sea. Okay. The problem here is the verb na'ar. And that's going to be the rub here. You look up na'ar in Halat, the Hebrew Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament. Okay? It's going to say that na'ar actually means shake off. It does not say overthrow, does not say drown. Now, overthrew is a traditional translation. Now, we do find this where English translators will sometimes use tradition over good modern scholarship. We see this even just right in this passage, where it translates the Yam Suf, as the Red Sea. That's not a translation. That's not a direct translation. Yam Suf literally means Sea of Reeds. Red Sea is a traditional translation from the Septuagint into Old English Bibles like the KJV. Now, why do translation committees do this? The reason is because if some of these passages aren't translated in a traditional way, English readers get very upset. If they just started translating Yam Suf, Sea of Reeds, or the Reed Sea, man, there'd be rioting in the streets. It'd be our 57. We would have one of those 57 moments. Because a lot of Bible readers are very, very picky about certain passages. This is one of them. Okay? This is why Na'ar is being translated as overthrew, not to shake off. The idea here of shaking off here is that Pharaoh and his army are so insignificant that what God is doing is just brushing them aside. Brushing them aside. This is not a statement of mortality. Okay? This is a statement of, compared to God, Pharaoh and his army aren't significant. Now, if we do try to double down on this and say that, it says that they clearly drowned, we're going to run into some issues. Okay? One of the issues is none of the pharaohs of the New Kingdom drowned. We don't have that. Most of them died of old age, disease, injury, but none of them have the telltale signs of drowning. None of the lacerations, sand in the mouth. And frankly, with the sea closing, there would have been a lot of sand being kicked up by that. And a lot of lacerations. You would have seen that on a dead body. Okay? We don't see that on any of the mummies. We got the bodies, remember? This is Egypt. So none of the bodies of any of the potential Exodus candidates have that. Those indications of drowning. Second of all, the entire army of Egypt wasn't destroyed. It was essentially the chariot corps. And it was the chariot corps that was stationed in the eastern half of the Nile, of the Nile Delta. So those who were stationed at Pi-Ramses, at Charu, at Migdol, so those garrisons of chariots. And the reason why we know this is because the chariots went to full tilt and reached the Israelites in the middle of the night before the infantry could show up. Okay, if the whole army was, dead, who was there to collect the bodies? 3 days into the desert? It was basically the infantry who came up after and found the disaster. And the Israelites, at that point, were gone. But that's what it took to destroy the warring capacity of Pharaoh, was the destruction of his chariots. Not necessarily his infantry. Because they hadn't caught up. And the chariots on, say, the western side, we have to remember that like, for example, Ramses II had chariot division assigned to El Alamein, way out in the west, to guard against the Libyans. So, when we look at a passage like this, we have to remember that what the Bible is giving us here is a poetic interpretation that is consistent with what the text says, but it's also we also have to be careful not to overread it either. Unfortunately, Sam here's wrong. He's very wrong. And even in the account of the Reed Sea, if we go back all the way to Exodus, I mean, I can point you out where, it's not the infantry, it's the chariots. Pharaoh isn't even there. He's not even there. Now, yeah, he might have saddled his chariot. He might have rode it all the way to Charo. It's possible. And he might have decided to, I don't want to go the rest of the way. You guys go. We don't know why he wasn't there, but he wasn't there. And that's demonstrably provable by both archaeology and the biblical text itself. He just wasn't there. But and the reason is because God had a different plan for Pharaoh himself. Different plan for Pharaoh himself. And that plan for Pharaoh himself was to have him live a very, very long life. You see, one of the things about monarchs that live really long, like Queen Elizabeth II, like Pepi II, like Ramses II, is there's no new blood. Those kingdoms become weak because you have one guy on the throne for so long. The dynasty struggles and falters. By keeping Ramses II on the throne for as long as he did, it faltered. The Egyptian kingdom faltered. And this made it easier for the Israelites to then get a foothold in Canaan. So there's a reason why all this particular stuff takes place. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Sorry, I mean, Sam's going here by Islamic tradition. This is not something that, even the most conservative scholars these days, in Christianity, in Judaism, most conservative scholars these days don't basically don't think Pharaoh drowned in the Reed Sea. It's just something that people are reading into the text. And this is the problem with eisegesis. We have a certain idea about how the Exodus took place, and they're reading that idea in there. So unfortunately, Sam's wrong. All right. So anyway, thank you very much for that question. Thank you very much for I think it was the Camel Leopard who sponsored it. Here. Yep, it was a Camel Leopard who sponsored that question. So I want to thank you, Camel Leopard, for sponsoring that question. It's a great question. We are going to be doing a full video on this. Okay. So I have been asked to do a video on this, and I will be doing a full video on this particular topic because I think it doesn't happen. You don't get this one very often, honestly. Because I mean, even ABR, like Associate for Biblical Research, I mean, they're very conservative. They're fundamentalist kind of conservative. Even they don't think that Pharaoh drowned in the Reed Sea. So, if they don't think it, there's probably not much to it. So we don't, as I say, we don't get this question very often. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Camel Leopard for $5 again. Thank you very much for the super chat. Some claim that Yeshua may have lied at the wedding of Cana when he told his mother Miriam that his time had not yet come. How would you best refute this? I don't think it's first of all, I don't think it's a lie. But it's also, I think, what we see in that early sort of ministry of Christ is he doesn't want to show the big miracles first. But he's also showing his respect of the commandment to honor his father and mother. Yes, Mary here is being a bit of a busybody. She shouldn't be getting involved. Okay? She shouldn't be getting involved. It's not her business. It's not her business to get involved in this wedding. But she also cares enough to that she doesn't want the wedding party to be shamed either. Because running out of wine would bring great shame in the community for a wedding like this. So, there's it does have long-standing consequences in the community. Okay? It's not frivolous. She's not asking something frivolous here. And that is important. Is she's not asking something frivolous here, but she also is not seeing the big picture either. Christ understands the big picture. He doesn't want people to get the idea that he can just make wine on the fly. Because what happens later on with some of these food miracles, like, for example, the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000, people start coming just for the food. Okay? They start coming just for the meal. And when the meal ticket stops, they leave. In fact, they want to make him king. They want to make him king because he's making bread. And they figure, hey, we make this guy king, he'll just keep making bread for us. Not the way the kingdom of heaven works. No, he did not come to make bread. He did not come to make wine, but to show the power of God. And the power of God in his capacity to forgive sins and to conquer death and bring us to eternal life. So that's, I think, what he means here, that it's not yet his time, is that he's not quite ready to show these kind of miracles yet. He doesn't want to do it too early. And I think it's not that it's that he won't do it. I mean, because he obviously did it. He honored his mother. He saved the reputation of the bridal party. But I also think, too, that that he's letting also his mother know that this is a one-off. Okay? And I think that's what he's telling her. Is essentially, this is a one-off. I'm not just going to do this at any time. And frankly, he asks her, what does this have to do with me in the text? She asks him, and he says, he says to her, what does this have to do with me? Why was my doing a miracle here saving their reputation that they poorly planned? I mean, there was poor planning here. The bridal party did poorly plan this. They should have actually suffered the consequences of their planning, even though it would have been huge amounts of shame. Right? So he's basically, I think what's going on here is that he's telling Mary that, okay, we'll save their reputation. This is a one-off, because this is not something that we're not going to save every wedding party we go to. So I think that's what's going on here. It's not a lie. It's not a lie. It is telling, it's a way of informing, though, his mother that, yeah, we'll do it once, but be forewarned that this is a one-off. So I think that's probably the best explanation here. Is he's honoring his father and mother, his mother here. He's protecting the reputation of the wedding party. He knows that it doesn't have to do any. He knows it's not in the best interest of necessarily the kingdom to get involved, but he's willing to do so. But he's reserving these sort of miracles for later on. These weren't meant to be early ministry miracles. These are meant to be late ministry miracles. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a fair point. My wife brings up here a very fair point, is that God is never obligated to do miracles. they're at God's discretion. And ultimately, it is Christ here who is deciding to do the miracle or not. So I don't think it's a lie. It's just basically he's giving her a piece of information to let her know that, yeah, this is once. I'm going to do this once. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. We have a $10 super sticker from Ryan Naylor. Was there a question associated with that? Yeah, there was one before then, though. Take a scan down if I see one. I don't see a question attached with that. I just see it says thank you. Oh, okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Those super chats, those super stickers, they do help our channel immensely. It keeps the lights on. It repairs the equipment. It pays for our food and electricity. It's on our internet. So thank you very much. Every contribution like this helps us. So very, very much appreciated. And thank you so very much. Okay, Michael Laterno for Canadian $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Hey, David, is there a contradiction in Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply, and 1 Corinthians 7:33-35, where it explains that being unmarried is better? Okay. Let's take each one in context, because here, context matters. Now, here's the thing. You can make anything appear to be a contradiction if you take it out of its context. So, context really, really matters. Answer a fool according to his folly. Don't answer a fool according to his folly. Contradiction. Well, yeah, if you take both of them out of context, sure, you've created a pretext here. So we have to be very, very careful here that if the context is the same, then it might be a contradiction. But if the context is different, and I'm pretty sure in this case it is, because I happen to know both passages, yeah, it's not a contradiction. So let's just take a quick look at Genesis 1:28. All right, and we'll start at verse 27. And God created man in his own image, and in the likeness of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Okay. God creates a couple people and says, fill the earth. It wouldn't have done mankind much good at this point to be unmarried and celibate. That would have sort of been the end of the human race. Okay. The whole purpose of the creation is to establish the human race, which means multiply, spread out, fill the earth. So, the context of Genesis 1 is creation. It is the creating of creatures in their particular spaces and having them fill those spaces. So it would completely work against the notion of creation for there to be any sort of, say, attempt at restricting procreation here. So now let's take 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 7:33-35. Okay. Start at verse 32 here. But I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But the one who is married is concerned about things of the world, how he may please his wife. And his interests are divided. And the woman who is unmarried and the virgin is concerned about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and spirit. But the one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And I say this for your own benefit, not to put a restraint upon you, but to promote what is seemly and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. Verse 36. But if any man thinks he is acting unbecoming towards his virgin, if she should be of full age, and if it must be so, let him do as he wishes. He does not sin, let her marry. It's not a sin to marry. Okay? But he who stands firm in his heart, being under no constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided in his own heart to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. Okay? So then both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better. A wife is bound as long as her husband lives, but if her husband is dead, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But in my opinion, she is happier if she remains as she is, and I think I also have the Spirit of God. Okay. So, the context here is about satisfaction in the spiritual life. Okay? The idea is that those who are unmarried are free to devote themselves to service of the Lord. They have that freedom. There's no encumbrances on them. This is not a license to play video games. It is not a license to be a 40-year-old incel in your basement playing video games. This is not what it's talking about here. Not talking about that the unmarried incel is free to do whatever they want as such. It's a freedom, and it's to serve the Lord. And basically it's an admonition that in service of the Lord is where you find your happiness. So that's where the admonition is. Now, some spouses are more godly than others. Okay? I was very, very fortunate. I married a very godly woman. And she very much supports my activities in ministry here. Okay? But not everyone does. Okay? And because of that, there can be tension in a marriage that can lead to unhappiness, where one spouse, wants to devote himself more fully to God, and the other one wants more attention. And the fact is, when you're married, you have to please the other person. You have to please the other person. You're not a lone cowboy here. You now have a responsibility to another person. So what Paul is saying in this passage is, if you marry, you do well. If you decide not to marry, you do better. Because you can devote yourself to God, and if you do devote yourself to God, and that's sort of the catch here. That's the catch. It's the single and devoted to God that will give you the most happiness. He's talking about happiness, not necessarily what's sinful or not. Okay? So it's not a contradiction with Genesis 1:28. It's not a contradiction at all. Because he's not saying everyone should be single. Far from it. He is saying that for everyone, you have to do what's best. But If you marry, not a sin. If you stay single, you'll probably be happier if you devote yourself to God. So that's the context of this particular passage. So knowing that is the context of the passage, we see that there's two different contexts. And because we're seeing here two different contexts, there's really no inconsistency here between the two passages. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. I hope that answered your question. It's a good question, and it brought some interesting passages here. So that's always wonderful. Okay. Okay, we got another one here from Dr. Kenny Rhodes, unofficial, for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Ancient aliens, ghosts. What is fantasy? What is truth? What is possible evidence for angelic infiltration into space and time? Yeah, I think this sounds like this live stream is going to go 3 a.m. We started late already. Well, there's a lot here. Okay. The Cliff Note version. Ancient aliens. Fantasy. Ghosts. There's some reality there. Ghost, I think we discussed this actually in the last week's live stream. It's a very complex phenomenon. Very, very complex phenomenon. And I would suggest going to that last live stream to get a really good sort of overview of ghosts. You've got phantasms of the living. You've got the difference between hauntings and apparitions. Some manifestations of ghosts are divine beings in the respect of being angelic beings. Some are masquerading. There's the possibility that they are temporarily the spirits of the dead. There's the possibility that these are different kinds of spirits altogether. Something that's neither angel nor demon. That's a possibility. They show up in some very interesting ways. Now, one of the things we didn't talk on last time is that most, the only thing that can actually detect a ghost is a human being. Only thing that can actually detect a ghost. Human beings are the only things that can see ghosts. Now, there are some electromagnetic phenomena that often accompany hauntings and apparitions, but it's not consistent necessarily with the observation of the human being. There's also the possibility to, like for example, a haunting is something that sort of, plays over in a repeated fashion. So there's no real interaction between human beings and, say, a haunting. But apparitions are different. There's some sort of human apparition interaction there. There are many people who have witnessed, like for example, there's been people who've witnessed the same apparition and described different things. So there's a component of this too where the brain fills a lot in. One of the interesting things about ghostly apparitions is that almost across the board, people will notice that they're fully clothed, the complete body but no feet. Very unusual for a report of a ghostly apparition to be seen with feet. That's actually a very interesting psychological component to that, which is that when most people dream, they don't dream with their shoes on. There's only one sort of exception to this, which is those people who are obsessed with shoes. People who are obsessed with shoes will dream themselves with shoes and will see ghostly apparitions with shoes. Very strange phenomenon. Very strange. But almost everyone else will see like a ghostly apparition or even conceive of themselves as bodies without feet. Very interesting. So there is a component here that the mind sort of fills in. And the other thing here about ghosts is very interesting too, is, you look at these ghost hunter on History Channel. Oh, those are so bad. They're basically, one of the things is they do these like ghost hunting in the dark. Most ghostly apparitions, whether hauntings or apparitions, take place in broad daylight. Okay? Broad daylight. With full light. It's very strange. They don't happen in the dark. Because if it's dark, you can't see anything. We're creatures that see in the light. Okay? Yeah. Like reports of shadow men. Like, I'll admit, I saw one. I saw one once. And it was at 10:30 in the morning in a fully lit stock room. Okay? It was the strangest thing I ever saw. There was no shadows. Okay, it was I mean, the whole stock room is lit up with fluorescent lights. Okay? And I see the shadow man walk by. What the heck? What's this? There's no shadow in here. I mean, it's just the strangest thing to see this in broad daylight. And that seems to be the norm, is that most apparitions and hauntings take place in broad daylight. Not at night. Most people are asleep at night. Now, they don't see anything at night. So, a lot of what we do, what we conceive of as, it's Hollywood. It's Hollywood. It's Hollywood. So, but I do also think there is some evidence of angelic infiltration here as well. Especially when things start, moving around, like potentially poltergeists, spirits that throw objects, ones that interact in such a way that they know details of your past. I do think that that is possible evidence for angelic infiltration. So, yeah, we could just keep going on talking about this probably all night. I mean, I said it cold notes, but I've actually given you a whole lot here. So, anyway, thank you very much, Kenny, for that super chat. It's obviously a fascinating question. I find it fascinating. I'm sure others do too. So, anyway, thank you very much, and a great question. Okay. Camel Leopard for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Controversial question. We have to have in more controversial questions. Oh, man, haven't I put myself at YouTube's mercy enough tonight? Come on. Completely understand if you'd prefer not to answer. Who were Yeshua's brothers? How were they related? Okay, that's all going to depend on your denomination. Honestly. Okay. If you're Roman Catholic, you're going to say that these are the cousins of Jesus Christ. Okay. If you are say Eastern Orthodox, you're going to say that these are the sons of Joseph from a previous marriage. If you're Protestant, you're going to say that these are the younger siblings of Joseph and Mary. It's all going to depend on your where you come down on this issue is almost entirely going to depend upon what your what's your denominational proclivity here? Now, I think that the Eastern Orthodox and the Protestant view actually has the strongest case here. Okay, I don't think these are cousins. I think the strongest case here is with the Eastern Orthodox and the Protestant view. That's just my opinion. Okay, but I'm not going to land hard on this issue. This is just one of those issues where we just don't have enough evidence. So, because we don't have enough evidence, we just sort of have to go, okay. It does claim they're brothers. It does claim that Christ had 4 brothers and 2 sisters. Okay, that's what the Bible claims. Whether they're half brothers, whether they're full brothers, don't know. Hard to say. And look, even like what was the name of that church father? There's a church father. Something, I think was it Jonah and Assyria, something like that. It's the one that the Eastern Orthodox love so much. Here, I'll look it up quickly. John of Damascus, in his exposition of the Orthodox faith. All right. He basically says, that they could have actually, even though he doesn't hold to the view, he holds to what's the Eastern Orthodox view, that they were brothers and sisters were actually, from Joseph, not Mary. Even though he holds this view, even he recognizes that it's a possibility that these could have been the offspring of Mary and Joseph. His argument is very weak, to say, which is, but it's unthinkable. It's icky. Well, okay. I don't think any Proverbs 31 wife is icky. But that's a view of a monk. That's we have to understand that John of Damascus is a monk. He's been celibate all his life, never married. That's going to be his view towards these things. Okay, but that's sort of the level of argumentation here too, because we don't have enough evidence. So it does come down to aesthetics and more denominational preference, really, than what are the facts. So. That's about all I can say on this. Yeah, it's probably landed me in hot water again, but all in the service of Christ. So, okay, okay. Let me get it up there. Okay. Sentinel Apologetics. He asked Kiara to bring this to my attention. So, David, speaking of ghosts, my girlfriend had a dream on Father's Day of her father appearing to her in a glorified pre-cancer form. He passed away earlier in January. She's always been an atheist. But recently, through my guidance, she has accepted the gospel seriously, so she's a critical thinker. But her dream matches many Christian dreams of glorified saints, since her dad was a Christian. Praise the Lord. Yeah, I think there is some possibility that the dead can come back. Temporarily. We know that the prophet Samuel did with the witch of Endor. The Bible doesn't say we can't contact the dead. It says we shouldn't contact the dead. Okay? It's unlawful to contact the dead. But it doesn't mean it's not possible. So, I want to be careful here not to speak beyond where the Bible is, where the Bible's silent. So the Bible doesn't say you can't contact the dead. It just says you should. Now, we take the Eastern Orthodox view. A Christian is not dead. He's alive in Christ. This is where they get a lot of their justification for icons and praying to the saints. Now, sometimes I can go with that. Sometimes I can't. And I think it's going to really depend on the saint. Because there's some saints out there that I think were so scoundrel that I question whether or not they were saved, honestly. Some of them I just am not buying are in the faith. Because of their atrocious deeds or their attitudes or whatever. But so I think one has to be cautious if you take that view of which saints you pray to. But I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that someone who's dead in Christ can come back for a special purpose. So, praise the Lord that she's accepted the gospel seriously, and I wouldn't doubt that this is possible. So anyway, very interesting story or anecdote. But yeah, possible. Yeah, that's the other thing too. We're told not to contact them. Nothing's stopping them from contacting us necessarily. They're not told to contact us. We're just told not to contact them. Okay? No Ouija boards. Don't use your cell phone as a Ouija board. That's bad stuff. Okay? So, we're not allowed to contact them, but, they can send us an Instagram if they want. It's good to see you here tonight, Rob. Okay. I think we still got a few more super chats here. Okay. Renzo Flutes for 500 yen. Wow. From Japan, probably. Well, welcome. Konnichiwa from Japan. Konnichiwa. Dozo yoshiko. Currently, what is your biggest question on the Bible? Oh, boy. Great question. I don't know what my biggest question on the Bible is. There's things I'd love to know. Okay. See, I've got like 1,000 little questions. I've got 1,000 little questions in the Bible. I don't have the sort of big nagging ones. I would love to know more about what the paleography of early Hebrew would have been like. That for me would be a huge question. We don't have enough early Hebrew texts to really know what say Bronze Age Hebrew paleography would have been like. At least the language component of it. Now, hopefully there'll be some clarification. We'll get some more discoveries, and that will clarify things and make, give us some more idea of what the earliest phase of the Hebrew language is like. But this point's kind of a dark area at the moment. I'd love to know what that is. Really, knowing ancient Hebrew at that sort of ancient level, or at that more archaic level, would be very, very interesting for me. So, that would be a huge question for me. Other than that, I'd love to know, for example, which Pharaoh in Dynasty 13 was the one that Abraham talked to. Would love to know that. That would be just the bees knees to find that out. Now, I think that's next to impossible to find out, but I'd love to know. So So there's a few questions. They're all small questions. They're all relatively small questions. But there is some stuff out there that still sort of is beyond me. I don't know for sure. Like, for example, the tracing the route of the Exodus from P. Ramses to Mount Sinai. That's not so hard. After Mount Sinai, it starts to get kind of difficult. Because of the onomastica problem. I'd love to see more clarification there. Now, I know that a couple of fine gentlemen, one of them was Mark Jansen, was working on a book to do the whole route of the Exodus. And I don't know whatever came of that book. I think it kind of got stalled. I think they ran into some difficulties on that latter half. Now, first half, yeah, okay, no-brainer. It's pretty much a no-brainer. Latter half of the Exodus route is a lot more difficult to nail that down to physical geography. So there's that question too. Another big question for me would be, what was actually decorated on the sides of the Ark of the Covenant? Bible doesn't say. Bible doesn't say what sort of side decoration was on the side panels of the Ark of the Covenant. We don't know. I'd love to know. Absolutely love to know that. I don't think I'll ever know. But I'd love to find out. Oh, yeah. I'll have to wait to heaven probably for that one. But I just would love to see, what that was. So yeah, I've got some questions I'd like answered. I've definitely got some questions I'd like answered. The resolution of, say, the whole the timing of the flood. Love to see that one too. We don't know for sure. Death Battletoads on the side. Okay, so there are some of my questions. Those are some of my questions that sort of keep me up at night. So there you have it. Tomo, thank you, and thank you for the super chat. Pepe the Frog, Peppa Pig. Okay, so thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and welcome to the channel. Glad to have you here tonight. Charles for $9.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. In Deuteronomy 23:15-16, is Deuteronomy 16 means the Mosaic law allows a slave to leave if they choose to leave? Well, let's look at it. Let's look at what Deuteronomy 23. Take it a little further back. Let's go back to 12 here. Okay. Okay, and let's put that up. All right. Now, understand a couple things. Slavery is a slavery in the Pentateuch is a specialty subject. It's a subject that is a high specialization. There are a lot of people out there that specialize just on this topic. I'm not a specialist on Israelite slave law. Okay, so I want to make that clear before I try to answer this. I think Michael Brown is probably more competent in this particular area than I am, which is why I don't actually debate on this subject, just because it's not in my wheelhouse really. But with that said, however, we can take a look at the passage and we can see what we can make out of it. All right, now 15-16. Start 14. So, since the Lord your God walks in the midst of the camp to deliver you and to defeat your enemies before you, therefore your camp must be holy. He must not see anything indecent among you, lest he turn you away. You shall not hand over to his master a slave who has escaped from his master to you. Now, let's see what we mean here. Ebed, slave or servant. Adon, master, okay. Okay, not sell, strip, plunder, deliver oneself. Okay. He shall live with you in your midst, in the place which he chose in one of your towns, where it pleases him. You shall not mistreat him. Okay. Now, live in the town in your midst, place. Okay. Live with you in your midst, in the place which he shall choose. Towns. Where he pleases him, and you shall. Okay. All right. Now, this is where the things get really difficult. Now, there is many kinds of slavery in the Torah. You have indentured servanthood, which is basically one Israelite trying to relieve a debt by selling himself into slavery. Okay? That is supposed to be temporary. That's for 7 years, and at the end of 7 years, he's supposed to be let go. Or let go on the 7th year. Okay? There is servanthood and in another respect too. Like, for example, let's say an Israelite sells not only himself into slavery to relieve the debt, but leases his land. Well, he may go after 6 years, but he's still in a state where, you know, he doesn't get the land back. He's got no way to support himself. So he becomes effectively a kind of servant. He effectively becomes a kind of servant, tilling the land. You know, basically a sort of a worker for hire at that point, because it is ultimately his land. And then at the year of Jubilee, the land reverts back to him and his clan. Then you've got the slaves that were taken as a result of war, of conflict slaves. And these are very, very common in the ancient Near East. You find them in Egypt, where, you know, somebody conquers, the Pharaoh goes on a campaign, brings back a whole bunch of slaves, essentially as a kind of workforce to do specialized labor. Okay, we're not really told here what kind of slave it refers to, so we don't know exactly here. It does look like it's case law. It's very, very similar to the case laws that we find in Mesopotamia. You know, if A happens, then B. This is the case. This is the decision. So this does really sort of have the smattering of case law. But then again, too, slaves that do this are taking one heck of a risk. You know, Hagar told this. You know, it was so bad living under Sarah that she took her life in her hands. She got so desperate that she ran away onto the Way of Shur. And the Way of Shur is a death trap if you don't have sufficient water. Because there's no oases. There's no oases on the road to Shur. You know, you're 7-8 days in the desert and you're out of water. You're essentially a dead man. So she must have felt it was so bad that she would have risked that. Better to die of thirst on the roadway of Shur than to stay with Sarah. Okay? Now, she goes back to Sarah knowing she's going to get a good beating. Good beating. So slaves who run away and get caught are taking risks. They're taking risks. they're taking risks that they're going to get beaten. So, a slave that attempts this, it's not without consequence if they get caught. But the case law here does seem to imply that if they do leave and they are successful, that free men are not supposed to turn them back. Now, he's still got other problems. His problems aren't over. He owns no land. How does he survive? Okay. Now, it does say you shall not mistreat him. You do not mistreat him. It does say he can live where he pleases within, within your towns, the towns of basically the clan or the tribe. But he's going to have a hard time making a living. Now, if he makes it back to his homeland, as if he was a war slave and makes it back to his homeland, okay, then he's probably better off. If he's an indentured servant, then he might still have to pay his debt. So there's still probably some consequences to this particular action. But again, keep in mind, I'm not an expert on this subject. General consensus of the scholarship at this point is that most of the Pentateuch is essentially examples of case law, as most of the laws of the ancient Near East are. So, again, it does seem to be a descriptive case here as much as although we do tend to say, okay, yeah, okay, there's a prescriptive aspect to this also. So, anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and it was a good question. But again, this is a specialized area. So, with that in mind, let's go on to the next one. Another Dr. K Rose unofficial for $1.99. Well, thank you, Dr. Kenny Rhodes. You've been quite generous to me tonight. Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. So, I hope you're having a really good time tonight. We just love having you here. And I think this is it's wonderful that you were with us tonight. So, thank you very much for the super chats. He says, let's hear a Rush tune. Well, I'm also not going to violate YouTube's rather nasty copyright system either. That one I have been zinged by. So I've never so far violated YouTube's community standards, and I'm sure tonight's going to be the exception. But I'm also not going to wave the red flag against YouTube's content ID. The only redeeming fact is I'm probably so poor at playing that guitar that if I did play Rush, it wouldn't sound anything like Rush. So, Scott Adams once said, Peanuts, the story of a boy and his dog. Dilbert, story of a boy and his dog. What's the difference? The quality of the artist. It's not copyright violation if you suck. Oh, I don't think anyone wants to hear me play Rush, so we're going to pass on that one. Okay, Scopus 1 for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Is it first time here? I don't remember seeing you before. Well, welcome to the channel. Welcome to our live streams. I hope you're enjoying this. Any thought on John Walton's new book on demons? No, I haven't read it yet. Honestly, I haven't actually seen the book, and I'm curious about it. But no, I haven't read it yet. So, Normally, I pick up a lot of my theology books, a lot of me on books like this. When I go to the theological conferences in November, like ETS, like Azor, like um, SBL. When I do those conferences, that's where I pick up a lot of books. Um, However, with COVID, I haven't been now for to those conferences for 2 years, so I'm a little behind on my reading because of it. So, Scopus One says Michael Heiser was not a fan. Yeah, I'm not surprised. As I said, Heiser's got his own views on this, so doesn't surprise me. I'm sure he's not a fan of my views on this either. So that's you. You can't have a fan of everything. So you can't please everyone. Okay. Awesome. Definitely will say hi to her. Um, we're getting. We've got a. Looks like a. Okay. Um, I'm not sure what that unit currency is. But from professional work for 40 of your currency. Thank you very much for the super chat. Great to see you here tonight. Very much appreciate you helping us out here. And he also follows up with the another one for 40. Smiley face with smiling eyes. Appreciate it. Well, thank you so much. We really, really love doing these live streams. I mean, this is the highlight of my week. It really is. We adore the questions. We adore the chance to actually interact with our community. For those of you who don't know, I think it's our third week now of Discord, having a Discord server, and that's just a great source of community. So for us, this is a chance for us to reach out to people, to interact with our community, to answer your questions. We have to be very honest. The questions got so overwhelming. We couldn't do it anymore. We have a difficult time just doing the questions on the current video. So it just got so overwhelming. We had to find a way to compartmentalize the questions in one venue so we could attack all the questions at once in a dedicated time slot. So that was the source of these live streams, and it's worked out so well. It's built community. It's created a network of friends. We're just so loving doing this. So anyway, thank you very much for the 2 super chats. Very much appreciate it. Okay. Sentinel Apologetics for $5 Australian. Thank you very much. Daddy Falk, I just finished a 4-hour Q&A myself. Yeah, but you can go on for 6, and you seem completely refreshed at the end of this. I'm doing like 2-3 hours, and I'm dead beat at the end. I don't know how you have the stamina. I don't see you chugging down coffee or whiskey as you do this. So I don't know how you do it, brother. It's just... yeah, probably. Youth. Youth. It's been a month, he says, of no streaming, but I'm back at 100% health. Praise the Lord. We've been praying for you. So we've been praying for you, and I'm glad to hear that you're at 100% health. Praise God indeed. Hope you're well. Well, we're doing pretty well. Just the typical normal aches and pains of being an old guy. So age is catching up. But other than that, we're doing great, and it's been really wonderful to see you here tonight. I did really appreciate that your girlfriend's story. I think that was very interesting, and it did raise a very good point. So I'm glad you shared that with us tonight, and I'm glad you allowed us to share that with the community as well. So thank you very much for that. That was just wonderful, and thank you for the super chat and being here to support us. We really appreciate it. Okay. Sentinel Apologetics for $5 again, Australian. Thank you very much. Speaking of ultimate questions, mine is whether Alicia was Thor after all. After recovering a lost axe head from the Jordan River, 2 Kings 6, 1-7. Yes. Well, it did show he had the power of God. Water manipulation was a very, very important sign of prophetic gifting. When you look at, say, Egyptian wise men, sages, magicians, they had the ability, it's said in the Egyptian texts, to fold water. To fold water, part water, manipulate water. They were water benders, for a lack of a better term. They were water benders. Moses, his sign was the parting of the Red Sea. Another kind of water bending. Joshua, when he comes to the Jordan, parts the Jordan River. Another form of water bending. Elijah and Elijah do the same thing. This was seen as one of the important signs of a prophet. So, there is an aspect to this that, it's more than just recovering the axe head. It's more than recovering the axe head. It's basically showing the sign of God through the manipulation of water. Okay, and this was a very, very common. It was, as I say, it was an expected prophetic sign in certain circumstances. We do find this, for example, in as I say, in Papyrus Westcar. We see this in Papyrus Westcar. Where in the story of the Lost Amulet in Papyrus Westcar. It's a story that purports to talk about Khufu and his harem. And Khufu had a really bad reputation. Now, he's the builder of the largest pyramid in Egypt. He had a real bad reputation in Egypt. He was a dirty old man. But he was bored one day. So he called in his wise man, his magician, who was said to be excellent at fingers. I love that term. Excellent at fingers. And Khufu says, I'm bored. I'm really bored. I want to be entertained. Okay. So he says to Khufu, to King Khufu, all right, have your harem dressed only in netting. Only in netting. So they're not wearing any linens. Only in netting. And have them row your royal boat. Yeah, dirty old man. Okay? Now, one of his young queens was wearing a turquoise amulet. Okay? And turquoise was an import. It was real expensive, and good quality turquoise was worth its weight in gold in Egypt. So, the women start rowing, and they're jiggling, and Khufu's entertained. And one of these young queens drops her amulet into the Nile and goes straight to the bottom. And she's inconsolable. And Khufu goes, "Oh, don't worry about it, honey. I'll buy you another one." She goes, "I don't want another one. I want my amulet." So Khufu goes to his magician, and he says to his magician, this was supposed to entertain me. Now I got a problem. Now I got an unhappy wife. Do something about this." So the magician with the excellent fingers, he does his water magic and folds the river like a cloth. And at the bottom of the river is the amulet. Okay? When this is something, this whole idea of magic, Egyptian magicians being able to manipulate water, very, very emblematic. Very, very emblematic of Egyptian, magical power. It's something that transitions over into Israelite prophets also. That the Israelite prophets can divide water as well. So yeah. The point here is not the lost axe head. The point here is the parting of the water. That's the point here. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat, and thank you for allowing me to go on into this bit of a rabbit trail. But I find it a very, very interesting piece of ancient Near Eastern contextual material. Okay. Oh, what a special treat. Miss Woozy. Hi, Hezekiah. So great to see you. Thank you for that super chat of €5. Just so wonderful to see you. It's been a long time since I've said hello to you. No questions. Hello from us. Well, wonderful. This is a very, very special friend of ours from the Netherlands. Wow. She's helped us out a lot in the past. Just a great friend. Bunny mom. She took care of one of our bunnies for a very long time, and we were so grateful for that. We couldn't when we were forced to move back to Canada from England. We couldn't afford to at the time to bring back our pet rabbit. So she fostered him for a couple years until we could get the money to bring him back home. And we so appreciate that. He was so special to us, that bunny. It was just meant so much to us, that what she did for us. So this is a very, very special friend that I just want to honor on this channel, because she just did great things for us, and we so appreciate her. So it's so great to see you tonight, Hezekiah. This is an unexpected and absolutely delightful treat. Wow. How fun to see you. She should be able to find Moon Knight, yeah. Oh, yeah, she should be able to find Moon Knight. I don't know where, but yeah, she should be able to find it. And Moon Knight, I just don't know. But you have more control of the chat than I do, so. Okay. So thank you very much for dropping by tonight. It was so great to see you. Okay, Sentinel Apologetics, Rob again for another $5 Australian. Thank you very much. Basically, Walton says that demons in the Bible were never ontologically real, just literary A&E mumble jumble to move the story script along. Yeah, I'm not buying that. Yeah, I'm not buying that for a moment. Yeah, I don't think it's A&E mumbo jumbo to move the script along. I think they're ontologically real. I've seen enough junk out there, garbage out there, to not doubt their existence at this point. So, yeah, I'm not buying it. It wouldn't be the first time I don't accept a Heiserite, theory. But I think if you accept that angels are real, I think you can accept that demons are real. I think they're ontologically very similar. I think really their differences come down to, one, what is their alignment between God and man, essentially, or sin. Are they pro-God or are they pro-evil, pro-sin? So that's going to be one separation. The other separation is going to be one of essence. Angels seem to have an essence that is created to do certain tasks. The essence of a demon seems to have been changed, perhaps by self-will, to be so that their essence no longer conforms to their function. So, yeah, I'm just not buying that they're not ontologically real. I'm sorry, Michael. I like you. I think Michael Heiser is very creative and has very interesting theories, and some I really think are, I'm all in on. Some I'm all in on. Some I'm half in on. Some I'm not in at all. So, I do tend to usually side more with Walton on this stuff. I have to be very honest here. But then again, too, Walton comes from a very similar background as I do. His work in the ancient Near East is more Bronze Age. My work is more Bronze Age. So it doesn't actually surprise me that Walton and I will have very similar conclusions on a lot of things. So take that for what you will. Anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. Okay. And I think we have got one last super chat here from Sentinel Apologetics again for $2 Australia. Jesus, the ultimate waterbender. Scotch from water. Wine from water. But yes, that is something. Okay, that's actually something we shouldn't overlook. That the changing of water into wine is a form of water magic. Proves his status as being a prophet equal to Moses. So, absolutely, there is something really to that. So, I know you meant that tongue in cheek, but there's actually a point there that I think is really important. So, the waterbender thing is just a really good illustration, especially if you know about the Last Airbender cartoon series. So, it's a good illustration. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Oh, wow. Another one from Dr. Kenny for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Tammy's deceased mother explained the Trinity to me in a dream after praying, fasting, crazy. No. No, not crazy. Not crazy. I don't think it's crazy. I mean, there is the possibility, to quote Freud here, sometimes a dream is just a dream. Okay? Sometimes it is your self-conscious at work, filling in the blanks. Other times, it could actually be a spirit a spirit of, in the case, Tammy's deceased mother, communicate with you. Okay? Maybe you needed that insight. Who knows? But I've also had demonic entities play tricks too with dreams. One of the strangest encounters I had was when my wife and I were going to seminary. Now, we went to bed and we were supposed to go to church the next morning, and both of us have a dream. Both of us have a dream. My wife wakes up, in the morning, and she goes, and she's all in tears. She's all in tears. She said, I had just the most heart-wrenching dream that my grandmother came to me, and she was so kind and so loving and so gentle. And I said, that is spooky. I said, I had the same dream. That my grandmother showed up, and she was so kind and so gentle and so loving. What was really strange about that dream was my grandmother in real life was none of those things. My grandmother was really a nasty person. Okay? Not to speak ill of the dead, but, for me, I rejected that dream as fake instantly. It was practically the same dream. It's not like we had watched a TV show from Hallmark, since I didn't watch TV. We didn't watch the same TV shows. It was very odd. It was one of the oddest experiences we've ever had as a spiritual experience we had as a married couple, because we could see a manipulation happening here. We could see a manipulation happening here. Where we were both being given the same dream. One, it was effective. One, it wasn't. One, it hit its target. The other one, it didn't. This also sort of formed my thinking, too, on the fact, too, that, demonic powers are telepathic. They're not, though. They're telepathic in the way that they can implant thoughts. They can't necessarily read them. At least they're not very good at it. Yeah. It was spooky. It was really, really spooky. And it was really, really spooky because same dream, same time, side by side, same content. One person it resonated with. I wasn't buying it for a moment. And then the reason I wasn't buying it, because I knew my grandmother. Oh boy. That woman was something else. Yeah. My wife says it was heart-wrenching for her. Absolutely heart-wrenching for her. For me, it was just like, oh my gosh, this was just the nerve of that spirit to try this stunt. Yeah, I was not happy with that spirit at that particular point. So, that was one of my encounters. That was one of my spiritual encounters. And as I said earlier in the stream, I have seen a shadow man. So I have actually seen an apparition. That actually was very recent. That was only like a couple weeks ago. So, yeah. I'm more convinced than ever that the spiritual, darkness exists. Spiritual darkness exists. So, I'm glad you had a pleasant experience, but it's sometimes they're not always easy to tell if they are genuine. Awesome if they explain the Trinity. If she explains it right, it's probably is Tammy's deceased mother. In our particular case, it wasn't. It wasn't our grandmother's. Either one. Yeah. it wasn't her grandmother, and wasn't really my grandmother. So, yeah. And I've heard other people have experiences like this too, but it's very rare. It's very, very rare to have two people affected side by side like this. It's actually something that was really a confirming thing too, because we could compare notes and we could compare them instantly. You know. So just so odd, so odd. So anyway. I think that's our last super chat here. I don't think we have any more. I will take a couple of non-super chats, and then we will probably call it a night, because I think we're over 3 hours already. Yeah, we're 3 hours and 20 minutes already. Oh boy. Okay, so I'm gonna saw something here I wanna. Mr. Rich B.O.B. comments, I had a similar thing happen to me one night, except an animal of mine had become a person. It had a very dark, familiar aura around it. Yeah. They can do that. They can do that. Yeah, they can do that. So. Oh, yeah. Absolutely, RG strategy. It is very creepy. Never thought of that when I had a dream of my late grandparents. Well, one of the things is they do have a, I like to say demons hunt in packs. They hunt in packs. This is how they give people the illusion of being omnipresent. Is they can be two places at once. Well, there's really not two places at once. They're two demons in two different locations communicating with each other. You kind of got to think about demons as sort of like U-boat packs, wolf packs. They're under the water. You can't see them, but there's many of them, and they're hunting. They're hunting people down, one at a time, and they're coordinating their efforts. They're very much like German U-boat wolf packs. They hunt in groups. They find safety in groups. They extend their abilities because they are in groups. So because of this too, the advantage of doing this as a group is they have access to a lot of information. So, Mr. Rich B.O.B., demons hunt in packs. Yes, they plan this garbage out in my experience and do shift work sometimes across hemispheres. Yeah. So this is how they know so much. This is how they know so much. Is they'll share information within their hunting pack. So yeah, I think there's definitely something, that's how they achieve a lot of their sort of mystique, as it were. Is they're I mean, on their own, single demon isn't that powerful, isn't that intelligent, doesn't have that much information. In a group, oh yeah, they become very dangerous at that point, because they can gang up on someone. We see this in the exorcism, where in the Gospels, where a guy cleans his house, gets rid of one demon, and 7 more return. So absolutely, yeah. So they do absolutely hunt in packs, and they'll share information. This is why they can mimic things so well. This is why they can mimic people exceptionally well. Because if that particular hunting pack has the information on, say, your deceased relative, boy, they can make a really, really convincing copy. They can make a really convincing copy. You see, when they tried that same stunt on me, with in the case of the one that attacked me and my wife, when they tried the same stunt on me, they didn't have that information. They didn't have that information. Yeah, my wife's grandmother and my grandmother are very, very different in personality. Very different. Her grandmother was a lovely human being. Absolutely lovely human being. My grandmother was a bit of a dirtbag. So yeah. So let's see if we can find a couple more super chats, or sorry, not super chats, non-super chats, and then we'll call it a night. Oh, somebody did a double question. We're gonna punish him for that. Rohan Samuels posted the same question twice. Okay, I'm gonna take this one here, Slim 2K. From your study, do you think praying to the saints is biblical? I think praying to the saints is something I'm not always comfortable with. Now, again, we did touch on this a little bit before. The Bible doesn't make a strong statement on this. Now, from the Protestant perspective, again, it's going to come down to denominational lines. From the Protestant perspective, dead is, you're not supposed to pray to the dead. You're not supposed to contact the dead. Whether that's a dead saint or a dead sinner. Okay? Now, in the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox view, saints aren't dead. They're alive in Christ. Okay? So you're not really praying to the dead. So, at that point, I think it comes down to then it's a risk. It's a risk-reward assessment thing. Again, we're talking stuff here that's sort of outside of the biblical worldview in some respects. It's more of, we're now getting into the port of say church tradition instead of, say, what's actually made lawful in biblical canon. I don't have problems with people praying to saints. Certain saints. Okay? I'm going to qualify this. You want to pray to the 12 apostles, the 11 plus the one extra, fine, go for it. You want to pray to Mary? Okay, sure. You start praying to Judas Iscariot, I think we might have some issues. I don't think every biblical character was a saint. I also don't think that every saint was saved. In which case, you're not, if in those particular cases, I don't think that just because, say, the church puts its rubber stamp on sainthood doesn't actually mean they were saved. And I think that's the risk proposition. Is you do run the risk when you pray to the saints that you could be praying to someone who is dead of the second death, not just the first death. And I think that's the problem. So, so I think that's what makes me uncomfortable. Is I'm not always, as I say, I don't have a problem with the rationale. I think the rationale that is the of praying to the saints is very nuanced. I think the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics have a point that those who are alive in Christ are alive. You know, Christ himself says, the Sadducees, quoting Exodus here. I am the Lord God, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. He was God of the living, not the dead. Okay? So, so in that particular case, yes, I think they've got a point there, that the praying to a living person who's alive in Christ, not necessarily breaking that commandment, to not contact the dead. Now, the whole question of is it actually beneficial is a whole nother matter. Okay? There's a whole question of is praying to the saints actually beneficial, even if it's lawful, even if it's permitted. It might still not be beneficial, because we don't actually know if those prayers make it to the saints. There's no evidence biblically. We only have church tradition that tells us it gets there. And then what do they do with it? According to church traditions, they pray on your behalf. Well, how much time do they have in a day to do this? Look, I think, to be honest, the Virgin Mary is going to need a secretary to keep up with all the prayers. One spirit is not going to be able to keep up with all this. Yeah, the Virgin Mary is not omniscient. She's not omnipotent. She's not omnipresent. So, human spirits have limits. Human spirits have limits. So, even if you do pray to a saint, doesn't actually mean it's effective. So this is why I'm actually much more comfortable with praying to God, going direct to God. I don't have any problem with people who want to pray to the saints. I just don't think it's necessarily the best approach. And, again, I'd rather have a more effective prayer go to the God who is omniscient, who is omnipotent, and who is omnibenevolent, than to a human spirit who is, none of those things. So, so with all that said, we're talking here the difference between what is biblical versus what is efficacious. So, is it biblical? The Bible doesn't say. The Bible doesn't say. It all comes down to church tradition. It all comes down to church tradition. Is it efficacious? That's a lot more dodgier. That's a lot more dodgier. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Again, I don't have any problems with people who do it, if they want to do it. the only thing I would suggest is don't pick the dodgier saints, honestly, or those who aren't saints at all. Okay, so yes, I've seen an icon with Judas Iscariot on it. Don't pray to Judas Iscariot. Okay, that's not a good move. Just saying. So, thank you very much for that question. Okay, we'll take one more non-super chat and then probably call it a night because it's already midnight and I got to go to work tomorrow. I got a hungry bunny too that needs to be fed. Okay. Yeah. The guy who repeated his question 5 times, you're not getting it answered. That's not happening. Not the way this works. Yeah. Yeah, he's not going to get his question answered. We're just not going to do that. Because then what happens is if people repeat their questions many times, I can't tell what I've answered, and other people get drowned out. And if I passed over your question once, it means I'm not going to answer it tonight. So it's just one of those things that, I don't pick every question every night. So. Okay. Okay, I'm actually going to take this one from Warrior the Most High. This will be our last question of the night. I think this was kind of interesting. Okay. And it says, did the ancient Egyptians find dinofossils or prehistoric beasts? Okay, that is actually a very interesting question. And the answer to that is generally no. Okay? Now, there's an exception to this. They did find, Egyptians do find, like, fossil shells. Okay? We know they found, like fossil shells. Now, we have to kind of understand part of the ecosystem of ancient Egypt during the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods was underwater. Okay? Egypt was underwater through most of the Jurassic and Cretaceous period. So, they never found, they didn't have dinosaurs. Okay? And it seems to have been, Egypt during most of that time seems to have been a runoff plain. So as water was running off of the African shelf, it would run over Egypt. And this is what created the many layers of limestone that we find at like the Giza Plateau. So what we find at the Giza Plateau is fossils of brachiopods. Lots and lots of brachiopods are found in the fossils. Now you can go to the Sphinx Temple, and you can actually see where the Egyptians carved the Sphinx Temple around a brachiopod. So there'd be a brachiopod sticking out of the stone. And that's because the fossil is actually harder then the limestone matrix. Okay, so they did find fossils. There was the occasional, like today, people do find occasionally whale fossils in Egypt, like whale skeletons, but that's really about it. There wasn't a lot of dinosaurs in. Well, there's no dinosaurs. No aquatic dinosaurs have been found in Egypt. So it's unlikely that the Egyptians found, say, large prehistoric beasts like plesiosaurs or mosasaur or anything like that. So, and they certainly didn't find like larger terrestrial reptiles. It also was not an area that had a lot of, say, early mammals either. So, by the time Egypt sort of dries off, you're already about, at least by, say, evolutionary timescales, about 2 million years ago, which is fairly short in say, the evolutionary time scheme. But however, at that point already, according to at least evolutionists, mankind is wandering out of Africa at that point. Okay, so this is long after that, all that took place. So even if you believe in, say, a more condensed time scheme, you just are not going to find dinosaur fossils or prehistoric beasts in Egypt. As I said, the very most we find there is whale fossils. We'll find the occasional whale fossil in like the desert, but we have no evidence that the Egyptians found a whale fossil. We do have evidence that they knew about brachiopods, though, because we find them at Giza. We find them in the limestone of Giza, and they were definitely recognizable as sort of a clam-like organism. So that's about the best I can answer that question. That's what they found in Egypt, and the ancient Egyptians knew about the brachiopods. So they never wrote about them, but they carved around them. So they were there, definitely something that they encountered. So anyway, that's going to be our last question for the night. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Boy, we went a long time, 3 hours and 41 minutes tonight. I want to thank all our super chatters. You guys are real heroes to us. You guys basically help us survive. And we really, really appreciate all the support you've given us. We want to thank our subscribers and those who watch our videos on a dedicated basis. We also want to thank those who've been helping us grow by sharing the links of our videos with other social media platforms. We don't actually have a lot of cross-fertilization with a lot of other platforms. We're nominally on Twitter. We don't do a lot of Twitter. We don't do a lot of Facebook. We do Discord. But we don't have as much, say, social media outreach as, say, other channels do. So people who do share our videos with other social media do help us out. I also want to thank our Patreon supporters who never get enough credit. We really appreciate our Patreon supporters. They help us buy new equipment, and we are definitely in that spot where we are looking at buying a new soundboard and a new a USB hub, so since our last one burnt out. So anyway, I want to thank our Patreon supporters. They really help us buy new equipment, and we really appreciate them. So with that said, I want to wish everyone a great night. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We had some great questions tonight and really enjoyed this. And I'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Good night, everyone.